the regular monthly meeting of the Bahama-Sema Board of Education. I'd like to call that meeting to order. It is 7 p.m. on Monday, May 20th. This time I'd like to remind everyone who is a guest to sign in, and everyone to please silence your cell phones, whether you're a guest or not. And I'd like to remind our visitors, in order to facilitate an effective meeting, anyone who wishes to make comments to the board, please read the visitor guidelines found at the table outside the door. Complete the public participation form and get those to Jennifer here at the end of the table in just the next 2 or 3 minutes. Public participation is only allowed during the public participation portion of the meeting. Other than that, the board meetings are not interactive with those in attendance. The business meeting held in public, it is not a public meeting. At this time, Jennifer, could we have roll call?
Giles.
Here.
Keith.
Here.
Hendricks.
Here.
Schultz. Here. Larson. Here. Hennessy. Here. Nicole.
Here. At this time, the Youth Leadership Club is here, and they're going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. File on in. Coming in.
Come on up.
I go all the way
Come
down.
on up.
There you go.
Good job.
Thank you for coming.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Stay right there so I can get a picture.
Yeah, back up, I'm sorry, I have the official photo. Board members kind of stand, smile.
All right, now it's official.
Okay, now we're glad to have the Lincoln Trail Youth Leadership Club here tonight. They are going to be back in a little while as part of meetings. Stay tuned for more. Board members, you've had an opportunity to look at the agenda. This time I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Motion to do that.
So moved.
Jeremy, is there a second?
Second.
Lori, discussion on the agenda?
Can you add a discussion item for long-term facilities planning?
Typically what we like to do is have those in ahead of time so we can talk about that and be prepared. So we can add that maybe to next month.
Oh, I thought we could add it at the start of the meetings. That's why I thought.
Typically we have not.
Okay, and we'll for next month.
June 24th?
Yeah. But if you get those to us right before the agenda comes out, then we can get them included.
Is this the correct time to talk about order of the agenda? The handbook has the new prices for the lunch, and we're approving the handbook before the prices. I didn't know if we want to rearrange that order to make sure that we're not out of sync.
We certainly can do that. We can also edit the handbook if the lunch prices are not approved.
Okay.
Also, we're voting on the surplus items of the science book before we approve the new science book, so it seems like we should move that surplus to after we approve science books.
We can talk about that when we get to the consent agenda.
Okay.
Okay? All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, now consent agenda. The consent agenda includes several items: minutes, bills, treasurer's report, personnel changes, record management, a new activity account at the high school, and surplus items. Would anyone like to remove any of those from the consent agenda for further discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and that would be the science books.
I actually have a few of them. I'd like to remove the minutes. For the personnel changes, I think we need to at least remove the people that we vote on later on, because otherwise we vote them in the consent agenda before we vote them in under new business. So that would be Dustin Day, Marissa Hill, and Chad Benedict. The records management, I'd also like to pull. and the surplus items.
So you want to pull minutes, personnel changes, records management, and surplus items.
Yes,
That would leave in the consent agenda the bills, the treasury report, and the new activity at the high school.
correct.
Okay? Let the record reflect, the consent agenda is modified to include those 4 items. There's a motion to approve that as presented.
Will we have discussion on that?
Yes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Discussion.
Yes, my understanding as a board member and a community member is that we put the minutes and the board package and the agenda out on Friday at 4 o'clock. If we have questions or concerns with it, we bring it so that we can know ahead of time, so that if there are questions or concerns, that we can do our due diligence for the community and know what concerns ahead of time. I think it's kind of just bad practice to bring them out at 7:06 when we've known what the agenda was since Friday at 4 o'clock, like the whole community.
I'm just simply saying that I think that some of these warrant some discussion. We just had a meeting before this that I think brings the minutes discussion and requires that to be necessary.
That's
And-
closed session, that shouldn't have been brought up.
That's part of what we're voting on though. as
I
part of the
can't
consent
vote
agenda.
on consent agenda items if we don't have the opportunity to discuss those.
According to Robert's rules, right, pulling things out of the consent agenda is not even votable, right? If someone pulls it out, it's out.
It's out, right?
So we'll just be,
Right.
the discussion
What-
here is on the bills, the treasurer's report, and the account, right? So we're just voting whether we want
Once
to approve
someone,
those
once
3
someone
things.
wants to remove something, it's removed.
Right.
Under Robert's rules. So from that point, there's a discussion on the items that are left.
Which should we start with?
But it's all together, right? We just vote on the consent
Yeah.
agenda. Do we approve those 3 things?
Motion on the table is to approve the bills, the treasury report, and the surplus, or the, the new activity fund at the high school. Is there any discussion on those items?
I'm sorry, Max, will you say what's left in?
Bills, treasurer's report, new activity fund at high school.
Are we gonna talk about what the issues are with these things?
I'm asking, is there any discussion on those?
We're just voting on what's left on the consent agenda.
Correct. Okay. We've got a motion and a second on those items. All in favor of approving those items, say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, we gotta do that on roll call. Go ahead.
Hennessy,
Yes?
Schultz,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes?
Giles,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
McComb.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the items we did not include in the consent agenda and that were asked to be removed. Oh, yes. Okay, minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
We can't have any discussion until we have a motion.
That's right.
Second, so moved.
Okay. Motion to approve the minutes, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion on the minutes.
I believe that the Open Meetings Act won't allow us to approve the closed session minutes that are included in the board packet because the summaries stated there are insufficient. For example, if you look at April 1st, there was a closed session meeting where there was discussion for about 57 minutes and the summary is 4 words long. There needs to be a substantial summary that explains what is discussed and what is said, just like you would see in the open meeting minutes. That's my objection to.
So the objection is that some of the minutes are not as complete as they should.
Right. I believe we'd be in violation of the Open Meetings Act if we approve them tonight.
What's part of the Open Meetings Act?
There's a part of the Open Meetings Act, I can find the exact spot, but it basically says that at the second subsequent meeting, you have to vote to approve minutes, and those minutes have to contain certain information like who was present, what were the times that the meetings took place, And then the last thing is a summary of the discussion. And that summary needs to be more than just a bullet list of a few items.
Well, what's the Open Meetings Act say? What does it have to detail in the summary?
And which is it? You said
I
4
took-
words and then you said bullet list. So is it bullet list?
It's
or
a
is it
bullet
4 words?
list.
I just
Okay,
did
so
the
that's
Open
not
Meetings
4
Act
words.
training last week.
Yeah, it's a bullet list.
So I can read to you what I just passed. Public bodies are required by OMA to keep minutes of all meetings, whether the meetings are open or closed to the public. Minutes must include, at a minimum, the time, date, and place of the meeting, a record of whether each member of the body is present or absent, and if present, whether physically present, present by video or audio conference, and a summary of the discussion of all matters proposed, deliberated, or decided, and a record of votes taken. The summary of discussion in the minutes must include sufficient data so either the public body or a court examining its minutes will be able to ascertain what in fact was discussed, the substance of that discussion, and what, if any, action was taken.
What's that training from?
So that is from Attorney General Kwame Raoul. Open Meetings Act.
So I took, because that's what new board members have to do, I took the IASB's board training, and it said something similar, but it was different wording. I was just curious where you got that one from.
Okay,
My objection to the minutes is that I was not a board member on April 1st and did not attend the full April 1st meeting. So I don't feel comfortable voting for minutes for a meeting for which I was not in.
And that was mine, I was wanting to
Okay.
abstain, I didn't feel like I could
Okay.
vote on meeting minutes where I wasn't present with
okay.
the
You
mind.
can just do
You're-
that though.
You're allowed to abstain.
I can abstain.
Well, no,
But you
when it's in the
can't do it
consent
in the
agenda,
No, but
you're,
just so you know, in the future, you
I
can
understand that,
abstain.
but you can't abstain from just a section of the consent agenda unless you pull it out. And that was my purpose for pulling it out, is
Okay.
I didn't wanna abstain from the entire vote. I just wanted to be able to abstain from the particular section of the agenda that I didn't feel was appropriate.
So my concern is just trying to protect the district from liabilities. We would be subject to liability for violating the Open Meetings Act. I would move that we table this approval for the next meeting. And the nice thing is, I know that there are notes that are taken for each of the closed session meetings. I would also include in my motion that we use those notes that already exist to replace the section about what the board discussed in the closed session. And we'll come back to it at the next meeting. I think we're still within the time
30
range
days
of.
for 2 regular meetings.
Right, so we're still within the time span.
So we've got a new motion to table the minutes to the next meeting.
And replace the contents of the discussion with the notes that are already in existence for.
Those are two separate motions, so.
It can all be
Okay.
one motion.
I think it can be one motion, but we can do this too.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Further discussion?
Well, I guess I would wanna, if there's more discussion to be had, I think there needs to be a legal opinion on what we need to have in closed session minutes.
I agree, there ought to be a process on how it gets
Before we
fulfilled.
decide and vote today to
And-
replace some minutes with some other summary, then we need to know what the legal opinion is on that before we do it.
Okay, I
Agreed,
amend my
yeah.
motion to remove that part, so my motion is simply just to table the minute approval for tonight's meeting.
I'll second that.
Mika, was that you second?
Yes.
So we'll table it, we'll get a legal opinion. It needs to come back on the agenda next month as not under the consent agenda, because we still have 2 board members who want to abstain.
Right, or at least from
Well,
that one.
it
I just don't
depends
feel
on which-
comfortable signing.
Right,
something
and
I
which,
don't-
unless we talk about the minutes individually, it's just hard to approve minutes that I wasn't here to hear.
I need a roll call vote on that.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes?
McComb.
Sure. Okay. Personnel changes.
I think we should just pull the three that we're gonna talk about later in the meeting out of the.
So the motion is to approve the personnel changes as presented with the exception of the three that will be voted on individually later in the meeting. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Perfect. Further discussion?
So to be clear, who are the three that we're pulling out?
2, 3, and 4.
It's just the new business items
Yeah.
of Dustin Day, Marissa Hill, and Chad Benedict. It's just because if we're gonna have any discussion, we've kind of already voted, I mean, it just seems procedurally out of order to vote on something and then vote on it a second time and not have the opportunity to have that.
Okay, any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Schultz,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes?
Hennessy. Yes. Hendricks,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Record management, what was that?
I think that's talking about getting rid of some recordings, correct? We're gonna vote on getting rid of closed session recordings, and I'd like to table that discussion. I think at this point in time, we need to be hanging on to those closed session recordings. There's no real reason that we need to get rid of those, and I think we've got some legal reasons to keep those, and it's in the best interest of the district that we just choose to table that and keep that for this point in time.
Dr. Hall, what's been our practice?
To dispose of recordings great older than 18 months.
What's the motivation to destroy them?
It's been in practice here for a while, I mean, no need to keep them.
Okay.
And we can.
So I had a chance to review the recordings and the minutes, before the meeting, and they suffer from the same problems that the minutes for the previous closed sessions do. There's, one or two words summarizing 45 minutes of discussion. So I don't think we can, because the concept of the Open Meetings Act is like, Colleen read, once you destroy those verbatim recordings, there's no way to recover what was discussed at those meetings.
You said recordings, though. You're saying the recordings only had a little bit of wording in them?
No, the minutes only had a few words describing the discussion, and the recordings were 45 minutes long.
Gotcha.
But the minutes are supposed to serve in place of the
Gotcha.
audio recordings, and then when I was listening to some of those, the minutes are actually incorrect. So what was on the recording is not actually accurately reflected in even just the bullet points of the minutes. And I think if we're gonna go through the step of actually deleting those recordings, we have some housekeeping to do and make sure that they're accurate and that we're protecting the district from any liabilities of getting rid of information. And
Exactly.
in the digital age, we had, big machines full of tape that we had to keep. I would understand that, but I don't think it's a storage issue. So I think right now, the safest thing to protect the district is to make sure that we do a little records cleanup before
So
we
the recommendation
destroy
is we table that. Can we get an opinion on that from our attorneys?
Sure.
Okay, surplus items.
Do we need to vote on
We need to
table?
vote on tabling that.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a motion to table?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Keith,
Yes?
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy. Yes. Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Childs,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Surplus items.
I pulled that because I don't really want to vote on getting rid of the old science textbooks until we have an opportunity to talk through the new textbooks and make sure that we have something in place before we, it just seems, again, procedurally out of order to vote to get rid of resources before we have resources in
Can we
place.
just bring that back next month?
Sure.
Is that what we do then with most of the things?
You could even just,
You just move it to
Move it
number
down.
13 of the agenda.
Yeah.
Well, how is it?
Okay, you wanna bring it back next month, you wanna move it to 13 on the agenda? I suppose we move it to 13 on the agenda. Or 14.
14.
Sure. Okay. We'll do that.
And that's disposal of.
Okay. That takes us to the consent agenda items. One thing we did do under personnel changes is we did hire some new folks for next year. Dr. Rummels here to tell us about some of the folks that got hired.
Good evening.
Good
It's that time of year where we start introducing our new staff for next school year. So I'm going to start, and then Dr. will introduce our new special ed staff that'll be joining us. So with us tonight, we have Kelsey Nunes. She grew up in Momence, Illinois. She graduated from Blackburn College in 2012 with a BA in secondary English education. She's taught the last 6 years in Danville, teaching high school English and some college and career readiness courses. Her favorite part of teachings are those moments in which she connects directly with the students in her classroom. So aside from teaching, she enjoys playing video games and board games. I see a way of connecting with her kids there. Reading, writing, theater, and camping with her family. She's eager to continue her career here in Mahomet, so I'd like to welcome her to the high school in the fall.
Did you? Awesome. All right. That's a fun one. I got married in Mo.
Caroline? I have my glasses, far away glasses on, so I can't see you guys. I'm really excited to introduce Caroline Hopper. Caroline grew up in Savoy, Illinois, and just recently graduated from Illinois State University in May with her Bachelor of Science degree in Education, Special Education. This past year, she spent the majority of her time in Decatur, Illinois, completing her final student teaching clinicals. She spent the fall semester at Hope Academy, where she taught kindergarten through 3rd grade students in a cross-categorical setting. She finished the remainder of her senior year during spring semester at Eisenhower High School, teaching in a self-contained social emotional classroom. Currently, Caroline lives in Savoy, Illinois. She enjoys spending free time with her boyfriend, her family, and her friends. She especially enjoys spending time with and walking her family's pet bulldog, no coincidence, and his name happens to be Steve. Caroline is so excited about joining the Mahomet Seymour School District and to start her teaching career. She will also be the head junior high cheerleading coach and looks forward to working with students in the classroom and in the gym this fall. So welcome, Caroline. Thanks. Nice glasses.
Welcome, Caroline.
Samantha, there you are. This is Samantha Saban. Samantha grew up in Orland Park. She graduated from the University of Illinois in 2015 with a bachelor's degree in special education and is currently working on her master's degree in administration. She's spent the past 4 years teaching students with mild to severe disabilities at the middle and high school levels in Urbana. Currently, Samantha lives in Champaign with her 2 dogs. She enjoys spending time with family, cooking, and staying active through yoga and outdoor activities. She is excited about joining the Mahomet Seymour School District and is looking forward to working with students and staff in the fall. Welcome. Welcome. I should say that both Caroline and Samantha will be at the junior high next year. Rachel. I knew she was here. Rachel will be our new social worker at the high school next year. Rachel Simmons grew up in Champaign, Illinois. She graduated from Eastern Illinois University in 2004 with a Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology and Psychology, and then went on to earn her master's degree in social work at the University of Illinois Champaign in 2006. She's spent the past 13 years as a social worker working with middle and high school age students. Rachel is moving to Mahomet in May, along with her husband Robert and 2 children, Catherine, who is 11, and Jacob, who is 9, and their 10-month-old husky named Sophie. So cute. She enjoys spending time with her family, reading, going to coffee, and on walking dates with her friends. Rachel is honored and excited to join the Mahomet Seymour School District and is looking forward to working with students, their families, and staff in the fall. Welcome, Rachel.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so new staff that was introduced, you are welcome to stay and stick around and join us for the remainder of the proceedings, or you may choose to leave.
Nice to see you later.
Remarkably, they're following the trend of a normal trend. Okay. Next is donations, Dr.
We have 2 donations this month, both to our Atlas program. $60 in cash from Winderson's Creations and $50 in cash from Matthew and Jennifer Walker for a total of $110. So we appreciate those donations and thank those two groups.
The recommendation of the superintendent is to approve the donations as presented. Is there a motion to do that? That was Colleen. Is there a second?
Second.
That would be Lori. Discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Giles,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes?
Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Nicole.
Yes. Anyone, it's communication time, by the way. Anyone from the PTO here that would like to say anything? I thought I saw one of our co-presidents around earlier, but I think he's here for another project. I'm sorry, PTO, MSEA. That's the co-president I saw earlier. Foundation, Lori, anything?
Yes, I do. So on Thursday night, the foundation is excited to be awarding scholarships that evening. That evening will take place at the high school on Thursday, and they will be awarding scholarships, which they generate their money from the Bulldog Bash, and so they'll be giving that out like they give out when they give the foundation grants out. Next year's Bash date is already set for May 8th, so that will be happening. And then graduation is Friday night, and the foundation buys and purchases and serves the cake to all of the graduates that attend and their families. So that's the foundation update.
Jeff, anything from visitors? No, okay. Board members, you've had a chance to look at communications from the buildings. And it's time, if board members have any questions, comments they'd like to make regarding goings on in the district, we can do that. We're at the end, who's here?
I just want to say thank you for another great year from our teachers and staff and students. And we have some who are departing, and thank you to you for all that you've done for our district. And I want to say too, that if there's any band or chorus parents out there, I really enjoyed the 7th and 8th grade choir in their tribute to Queen. Specifically, Another One Bites the Dust, and We Will Rock You was really good.
Yeah, I missed it.
Thank you.
I have no report.
Excited, #1 math team, state, high school, pretty awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, I know it's towards the end of the year, so I'm just sending vibes to all of you teachers and administrators. We'll get through this next week. My house is squirrely, so I'm sure those buildings are squirrely, but thank you for another good year of really good support to the kids. We see you and we recognize that what you do every day is really important. We appreciate your time and your effort and the love that you show to the kids. Just wanted to say that we see that you give that, and I personally am very appreciative of that.
I think it's pretty spectacular that the junior high jazz band went to go visit the General Assembly in Springfield at the Capitol. I can imagine that the fraction of folks in the room tonight that have been inside the General Assembly is fairly small, so it's pretty special to get kids to see that up close and personal.
I have no report for tonight.
A couple things I'd like to comment on. First of all, Lori mentioned the math team winning state. Spectacular. I mean, I did math in high school. They're doing things that I am amazed at. It's just great. Boys track won I think their 3rd sectional in a row. Last year, they go to state this weekend. Last year, they took 2nd in state. We're taking, I think, around the same number, if not maybe one more this year than we did last year. So we're wishing them well this weekend and hope that they will do well. And then we are losing a long, I'll use the word friend, and certainly one of our key administrators who's done a great job here. And Shannon, would you come forward? We have, we appreciate your leadership at the high school and everything you've done there to help us just be so successful. And we're gonna miss you as you head south and become a superintendent. And we just have a little something here for you to take and put on your new mantle or on your new desk or somewhere to remember us. And we wanna wish you all the best, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Say a word or two.
I'm good, thank you.
It's fine. Well, a tremendous job in the last several years shaping our high school. I know that.
Thank you.
I want you to know we appreciate that. Okay. Now, a time we look forward to every month. Try not to. And the finance.
He means it. Greetings all, get plugged in here real quick. Normally my May financial report is comprised of me talking about how we just got a bunch of tax money, and instead we're gonna talk about how no one's even been billed for the property taxes yet, okay? Jared, can I get some help? Oh. Always happens. You know all the secret buttons. Like I said, I'm gonna get an update on our property tax revenue situation that we have with Champaign County. Start off with saying that 53% of our total revenue comes from local property taxes. We've talked about that statistic several times, and of course the majority of the rest of our revenue comes from state funding and federal funding, but again, the majority there comes from local property taxes. And historically, we received about, in May and June, about 55% of our annual property tax revenue from Champaign County. So it's kind of coming off of a long period of our lowest cash flow, so to speak, from like January through April. And we're kind of waiting for that money to come in May and June. And it has been consistent, certainly as long as I've been here, and well before then, historically. Normally because those bills are mailed out May 1st. So this year, the county claimed that there's a multiplier they're waiting on from the state. And now they have that, so they said originally that the bills are mailed May 20th. And the latest article from News Gazette said May 28th. So we're a solid month late, which means those bills will be due June 28th. Like I said, we normally receive 2 big payments in May and June. It's safe to say we won't see a May payment this year, and the next few slides we'll talk about kind of what the impact of that is for us with our cash flow. That kind of puts into perspective there for that period, really from I guess even December through April. Again, during that time, we're still seeing state funding coming in consistently, 2 payments each month. It's interesting that it's now flipped, where state funding was always the one that we're waiting on, and now in this year anyway, the property tax revenue we'll be waiting on. So you see the lion's share of the revenue there in May and June, about $8.9 million. We don't know how much of that we will be receiving this fiscal year. Our fiscal year ends June 30th, and of course, so cash flow in April, so the financial report you have in front of you in your board packet, is usually the ugliest month we have. If we now get through May without the $4.745 million, it won't look much better. So if we look at some specifics with the projections for our bills, our bank balance as of today, $2.7 million. We have $408,000 in outstanding checks as of today. The bill list that was approved earlier in the meeting had a total of $875,951. So again, we're just kind of dwindling down the balance there. May 23rd, like I said before in the previous slide, we will receive that evidence-based, I put EBM, it should be EBF, evidence-based funding model, the state fund, or the state funding payment, 451. And then we'll get through May 30th payroll, At the most throughout this year, it's been 600,000 every 2 weeks, so that's the number I use just to be conservative. Along with its related payroll accounts payable, so paying Health Alliance, paying all the vendors for the payroll-related accounts payable. So by the end of May, we're looking at $681,000, and again, that would otherwise be that plus $4.7 million, quite a bit of difference. If we look into June, then we get that evidence-based funding state payment, June 12th, and then we get into another payroll. It happens to be an early one this year. It's June 14th, since that's a Friday, and then again, the associated payroll AP for that. So that shows we'll make it through June 15th payroll. Then we get that additional state payment, not additional, but the planned state payment, the final one for the fiscal year, toward the end of June. And then we get to that bill list, June 24th, $875,000. That will be, it's probably a high number compared to what it's going to be, but again, just in the interest of being conservative, that's the point where we go negative. I mean, can't go negative in a bank balance, but that's when we run out of money, so to speak. Again, at that point, if we wouldn't have received any property tax revenue, or almost $9 million that we didn't receive, I don't know of any public school district that can operate, that cannot operate on, and not receive those types of funds. That's nothing anybody can plan for. That's been consistent money for decades, and it'll show up still. It'll show up probably in July next fiscal year. But what that means in terms of trying to pay bills, essentially, we get into the discussion of tax anticipation warrants. And I cited the school code portion of that discusses tax anticipation warrants. It's essentially funds that you can receive locally in lieu from banks in lieu of receiving those property tax payments, and then you, with a low interest rate, short-term maturity date, usually a month or two, and then when you receive the tax money, then you pay those warrants back. You can, I guess, borrow up to 85% of the total amount you levied. That would be more than enough, of course, to pay the bills that we'll have coming around the corner. Make a point too that the funds they would be provided from a local bank. So usually school districts get multiple quotes from banks. Of course, staying local and then go with the lowest rate. Been chatting with
How quickly can you turn that around?
I'm sorry?
How quickly can you get that?
Can we get
I mean, do they get it the next day, or?
I think it's usually about a week process, so we'll get into that a little bit here with the next bullet point. And speaking with, of course, this has never been anything we've ever talked about. We've never had to. We've been talking with Chapman Cutler, our attorney, on these types of topics. A parameters resolution can be approved by the board at a special meeting the first week of June. So what that would allow it would designate school district administration, Lindsay and myself, and then the board president to issue those warrants as needed throughout the rest of the month, within parameters, hence the name parameters resolution. So up to X dollar amount, up to X percentage, interest rate, and then X maturity date as well. So kind of those three main factors that would be written within that parameters resolution that would give us some parameters to work within to go discuss with banks. And then, like I said, pay that the next day, or the next month rather. The latest I've heard from the county would be that as soon as they're planning, they get money, they're going to try to get that right back out to us. We always receive that direct deposit. So, here's hoping that continues. But we don't know the amount and when, which is the biggest bits of information we need to pay the bills. So, again, very unusual. Of course, everybody in the room that owns property haven't seen those bills yet, and so here's why. And it's been covered quite a bit in the news that last few weeks, so none of this is surprising, but it does have a huge impact on public school districts and other taxing bodies.
It's messing up a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Correct. So
I'm here to tell you it's messing up real estate transactions, including my own.
there you go.
So what was the multiplier? Was it,
It
did
was
it give us more than?
1.00 like it's been for the last 50 years.
Great.
So we waited for change.
Right.
So, the word for the county was the state didn't give us the multiplier.
Right. Other counties received it.
But other counties received their multipliers. Because we're the only county I know of that's having this problem.
I've talked to quite a few colleagues, and they're not in the same boat.
So, you just said this, but I'm gonna ask it again because I wanna
different answer that you can't give me, but,
I'll see what I can come up with.
the clerk's office has to give it. So they've given you no, I mean, could we slip into July and be in the same boat? Could we slip into August and be in the same boat? I mean,
July, maybe, August, unlikely.
okay.
Even July, I'd like to think unlikely. I mean,
Right,
again,
I
how
mean,
this has
It's a
historically come
crystal ball
through.
question, I get, but.
Sure. Now, they do keep pushing back when those bills are planning on being mailed out,
Right.
so.
Yeah,
May
part of the
28th.
problem is information keeps changing, right? As of a week ago, you were told they were gonna be mailed out today. And they swore by it.
3 days later, 4 days later.
4 days later, they changed.
Exactly.
But I think the point is, once the bills get mailed, cash will start to flow in, because there are some people that pay their taxes right away.
They do exist.
I'm not sure who those people are, but I'm told they're out there.
So there's mail on Memorial Day, right?
And,
Mail services and everything, I saw that, that's
That
smart.
night.
And I'm just saying, they're gonna flip money to us as soon as they get it.
Correct. Yes.
So,
So I'm hoping, I'm hoping maybe June 13th, we get a big direct deposit come through, and then again,
yeah.
June 28th, if not sooner. Depends what
Essentially,
they have said, they'd like to do 2 payments again, one of the payments distributed as they get that, as much as they have as of that due date.
Do you expect any of that 451,000 EBF to be at risk on timing?
Absolutely not. That's been consistent for the last 2 years, on the 12th and the 23rd.
Okay.
But so was the 1% for 50, how long did you say, huh? It was consistently 1% for all those years.
Oh, yeah, decades.
So this plan will for sure, not for sure, but the timing will be that you will not miss any payroll, any.
I mean, with what I have in front of me right now, yeah, and a lot of those assumptions are pretty conservative, using higher numbers. They're the highest we've had throughout the year in payroll. AP numbers that are pretty high.
And
Best of strategy.
as we approach these banks, have we given some thought to thinking worst case scenario and talking to them about July and August and what they would do to help us out? If it seems like there's a process that we have to go through that's a week or two, it might behoove us to just plan out worst case scenario so that we don't find ourselves having to have special meetings in July and August as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, an alternative would be also to, I guess that June, I guess the parameters resolution could be anything we need it to be, but
Okay.
I don't know if I would suggest including the July and August one. I don't think that would be likely. I don't think it would be likely.
But if we
I don't
did,
feel like, but we'll feel better about it not being likely after the tax bills actually go out in the mail.
Right, I'll feel better, yeah, once we see this.
Once the bills go out.
And then their payments are dependent on them actually receiving those bills back, correct?
Yes.
Payments,
back, and then direct deposit into our account.
How much will it cost us in interest to issue these warrants?
That's the big question. I don't think it'll be very much. I mean, when we started talking about tax anticipation warrants, I wasn't even sure of the first step. Fortunately, we haven't had to do that, but the first
When was
step.
the last time we had to do this?
I tried to go back and look, I couldn't find.
When I worked here before we did it, so that's a pretty general time frame, like, 15, 20 years ago. we did it.
So in terms of longer term planning, by the way, thank you for the red flag report. That's a very helpful organization of data for me at least. You can see a clear trend about days of cash on hand, and it seems like, I mean, the trend is going down. And right now we have 17 days of cash on hand. Do you think that the board should be reevaluating how much days of cash on hand we maintain?
You can reevaluate, but it will require some tough choices. I'll be honest with you. We've been keeping that tax rate level for the last 22, 25 years.
Right.
It would require a tax increase. It may require not adding teachers when we need to add teachers. So, I mean, that's a way to add fund balance if you need to.
But, so, I just wanna make sure I understand, if we had higher days of cash on hand, we wouldn't necessarily be as likely to be worrying about these warrants in this case. I mean, like you said, it's an extremely rare situation we got here,
Sure.
but is it?
I would invite you to look at the rest of the school year though too. I mean, to look at April specifically is, like I said, the worst month to look at for one. And it's low that way for all the counties across the district.
Well, and see, what's nice about this report is you show us April for the previous years, and like, in April 16 and 14, you got 33 and 49 days of cash on hand.
I would warn you to also consider though that state funding in the last 5 years has been incredibly inconsistent.
Okay.
So,
And is that the reason for the differences then?
that's one of the reasons, sure, absolutely. So I would invite any of those who haven't had a financial discussion with me to come in and we can chat and we can talk about the nuances that
What you're saying is the expenses are typically stable,
Sure.
revenues are not.
Right, but this is a case study for why, like, ISB recommends a higher day of cash on hand.
But it's an opportunity cost issue too, right? I mean,
Sure,
I think
oh,
what
yeah.
Fred is pointing out that,
Yeah,
like, we have to balance out the 180 versus another teacher, or the 180
That's right.
versus, but,
Or raise the tax rate.
right, I mean, it's all opportunity cost, but,
at the day,
and I think your point is
And
well
90's
taken.
always worked for
If
us.
we could do it, but more would be better, but.
90 is more realistic for us. We're inherently underfunded with our tax rate.
Mhm.
We're inherently underfunded as proven by evidence-based funding model with the state funding.
Yeah.
That's two hits on our biggest revenue sources, so, it would take some drastic moves to change that.
Other questions for Sharon?
How can we hold our county officials accountable?
Keep going. Yeah. I mean, yeah, keep going.
Can you speak to why we're over budget on capital projects, tort, and life safety?
Tort was a matter of risk management, legal fees that were not expected for the year.
Okay.
What were the others? Capital projects?
Capital projects and life safety.
We weren't sure of how much, for the capital projects, of the amount of bills that were coming through for the construction projects as we entered the year. Of course, we entered the fiscal year, the budget was approved in September, so we had a fair amount of bills left over from Middletown Phase 2. We always retain a good amount of those pay applications to keep the contractor honest, and we've been pleased with how they've rounded out the projects that we have since paid. What was the other one?
And life safety.
That's also a matter of timing with the bills of the roofing. We thought we would get those earlier, and they got those to us much later than we planned. So,
So by next board meeting, we ought to know whether they mailed the bills.
we'll keep everybody posted.
Our next board meeting, we may have to have a special meeting to discuss.
Yeah, I was gonna, I think it sounds like we have to have a special meeting in June.
We'll talk about it at the end of the meeting, try to schedule a date.
Or we'll walk around and say, please pay your tax bills when you go home.
Other questions for Trent? Trent, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the update. Next up, superintendent report, Dr. Hall.
Thank you. I want to take this opportunity to congratulate Mr. Matt Hensley. He's here, trying to not be noticed, but we're going to congratulate him on winning the Athletic Director of the Year award for the Division V Class 3 and Class A area. He was nominated by his peers at the Illinois Athletic Directors Association. So Matt, congratulations on that. Also want to now, we have a special presentation from the Youth Leadership Club at Lincoln Trail Elementary. And they're going to come in and provide a brief overview of their amazing work this year. Special thanks to Dana Martin and James Heinold who got this going, and we want to hear from them tonight. So come on in. Put you over there. Check the name out. Jared.
Only bigger disparity.
Yeah, sure.
Dana, we made more room. So if they need to come on.
This is 15 of the 19 members of our Youth Leadership Club. I'm Mrs. Martin, I'm a fifth grade teacher, and this is Mr. Heinold.
I'm also a fifth grade teacher.
Also a fifth grade teacher.
I'm gonna have the students that were members of the Youth Leadership Club introduce themselves, and maybe get some of the nerves off of them.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jack Meyer.
I'm Melissa Bell. I'm Allie Joker.
I'm Samantha Beasley.
I'm Alden Buckner. I'm Chloe Gabrick. I'm Courtney Lee. I'm Ivy Hewitt.
I'm Max Young.
I'm Rex Bell. I'm Audra Bell. I'm Adeline Ford. I'm Izzy Leeds. I'm Grace Margus.
And I'm Cindy Young.
This club actually is very new. We started in February. My homeroom did a camp food drive that Sydney will talk about in December. And we saw some great leadership potential in so many of our fifth graders, and also a need for some positive role models in fifth grade, just on the playground and some of those less structured areas. And they have exceeded our expectations. So we are so excited. I can't believe how many projects we've actually done from February until May, and they still want to meet even this week. The only thing they require is donuts on Friday mornings. So at 7:30 every Friday morning, all of these kiddos come. So I think that's pretty remarkable for 10-year-olds to get up every single Friday morning. They have great ideas. Most of our projects are stemmed from their great ideas, and sometimes we even have to scale them back a little bit because they're just so eager to take on the world. So we have a quick slideshow that they made with us, and so they will present some of the great projects that we've done this year, and that will take us into next year. So these are our mission. This is our mission and our goals. Mr. Heinold and I spent some time talking to Dr. Rummel and Mrs. Hunter and kind of establishing what we wanted this club to look like. And really just understanding leadership, how to connect with people, how to communicate and manage conflict, especially on the playground and the cafeteria. Also giving back to our school and our community, and just how to problem solve and make decisions. Can we talk about the curriculum?
Yeah, probably one of our hardest things that Mrs. Martin and I had to do was come up with what we're going to do on a weekly basis. So we did a lot of research on the internet, looked around for some things, so we kind of pieced things together for this year. And so what we decided, well, it'd be nice to find a curriculum that we would be able to use. So we wrote a grant, got a $500 grant from PTO, and then so we found some curriculum that looks like some things that we might be able to use to help with establish a consistent weekly basis for an entire year on curriculum for youth leadership. So one of the things that we're looking at are some mindset curriculum to help our youth in those goals that we're trying to establish with Youth Leadership Club.
Another great component of Youth Leadership Club is that we've had some sixth graders come back and help mentor and kind of fill in that gap between fifth grade and junior high. And so Sydney is one of those great role models, and she has really helped build their leadership skills as well. And so we hope to continue some of that mentorship as we move forward.
So my name is Cindy Young. I am a 7th grader at the junior high, and I'm going to be talking about service to the community and others. One of the big inspirations for 5G Pax Joy, for Youth Leadership Club was 5G Pax Joy. This was done with the help of Mrs. Martin's homeroom class and their families. The class provided 2 or more boxes of clothing, toiletries, canned goods, and gifts over winter break to 27 families in the community. The efforts of the students in the class through the project and during the year inspired as well the development of Youth Leadership Club, because many students showed skills in leadership, encouragement, and kindness throughout the whole thing. We hope to continue this project next year with the help of Youth Leadership Club as well. The next slide is leadership. To make the connection between Lincoln Trail and junior high, YLC had a few junior high mentors as well, including me. We wanted to serve as role models and leaders to our fellow peers and classmates. With the new curriculum, we will lead discussions about the core principles of leadership throughout the year, such as courage, honor, respect, responsibility, communication, confidence, perseverance, and innovation.
Okay, so I'm talking about service to our schools. So we helped the fourth graders with IRA testing, which is PARP testing. We came in at 7:30 on Friday morning, and we went down to the fourth grade hallway, and we powered down all the Chromebooks, and we rebooted them, and we made sure that they could log in without like any trouble.
We also greeted students in the morning at the drop-off line, just like Mr. Starwell does. So we kind of like helped him and said like good morning to all the students and hope they have a good day. We recognized a need in the cafeteria and problem solved to help custodians and supervisors. We picked up trash after when we were cleaning up after lunch and helped keep things more quiet. We also made an effort to include everyone on the playground. There were some people who were in the garden and to have anyone to play with, and we had people who would help play with them.
All fifth grade students were shown up. So we did something called third-party compliments, where we took these slips of papers and we wrote some positive notes. And so what we did was we showed a video to all the fifth graders, and then we made sure that they knew to put a positive comment. And then we YLC, we passed out all of the slips to every fifth grader so they could make a positive note.
And then they write down their name, the person's name, and then they'd write down their compliment. And sometimes they'd be really long, and then Mr. Heinold and Mrs. Martin, they checked them and made sure there was no rude comments, and everybody got one. And on the day that we passed out, everybody had a smile on their face. ILC made sure every single fifth grader went home with an anonymous positive message before spring break. The power of kindness is incredible.
So just some examples.
Valentine's Day. We made and cut and hang Valentine's Day cards for every single fifth grader, and we made about 250 of those hearts, and we hung them on everyone. YLC arrived at 7:30 on Valentine's Day to be sure that every student started their day off with a special message on their locker, and a lot of people, when we walk down the hallways, you'll still see their hearts.
We spent every Friday in the Compass Room eating with the students. We shared snacks, talked, made friends, and even helped with feedings.
This Wednesday we are gonna take the kids that we had out to a field trip to McDonald's, and both of our favorite parts were, one of the kids had this little green ball, and we would like play with them with it after they were eating. And we would like play basketball and play catch and stuff, and it was super fun.
So I did pre-teach PE, and basically what it is we help teach PE before the people's lesson, and we teach it to people who weren't exactly confident to do the activities on their own before, right as it was happening. We love playing with the students who weren't comfortable in activities on their own. So basically, we would ask them how to play to give them that extra boost of confidence to make them feel more confident. And we made lots of friends in there, and we just loved it as much as they did. So the second grade tours, we took our time during our class time. We went out and we met the second graders. We led the tours for incoming second graders at Lincoln Trail, and we just showed them around to help them know where their classrooms would be.
Where's my bullet? So there were about 3 of us a group. Basically what Izzy said. I wasn't here to practice.
It's okay.
It's okay, just tell us more about what you did.
Did you divide up, and did you all lead the second graders, or just a couple of you?
3 of us each class, one in the front, middle, and then one in the back. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, there's 3, so we didn't have enough for each class in second grade, so we had to pull some people from that weren't in Youth Leadership Club. So we would have 3 to each. We were each assigned a class. We would have kind of like a schedule, and we had to be there at a certain time to greet them. And we made sure they weren't really confused or anything, and we got to go into 3rd grade classrooms and show them around the different, in Mrs. McCoy's, there's different seating arrangements than Mrs. Reed's. They got different seats in there, so yeah.
Thank you so much for having us. And we are looking forward to many more years, hopefully, of YLC. Thank you.
That was outstanding. I know we have some parents in the room and like the new hired staff. I know you wish you could just spend the entire evening with us, but if you want to leave with your kiddos, you're more than welcome. Thank you for getting them here tonight. That was great. Back to Dr. Hall.
Oh, I just have a couple more things really quick. First of all, I just want to commend this is the literary magazine from our high school called Sonder. Really amazing publication. Just want to thank the kids and our faculty sponsors. Just the 2nd year for this, and it's really quite a little gem. And then also just want very quickly to acknowledge there's some landscaping taking place out here in the northeast corner of the building here. That is completely planned, coordinated, and carried out by Natalie Mitchell, one of our students at the high school. She will be the president of our FFA next year. But she coordinated lots of volunteers and donations from Farm Credit Illinois, Muhammad Rotary Club, and last Wednesday on the early release day got a lot of trees planted. There'll eventually be a pathway through there, so really amazing project from one of our kids.
Sure. Is that it?
Yep.
Any questions for Dr. Hall on her report? Okay. Hearing none, we're moving into regular business. Item number 1 under regular business is medical cannabis update. And our good friend Darcy Crea is here. She's been hiding in the back. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for being here.
Oh my gosh, that was a hard act to follow. I mean, after to ask for replacement.
But,
Sorry.
we appreciate the fact that you were here today and volunteered to stay and guide us through this. We understand it's a new state of Illinois thing. We don't really have, it's not like an optional program, but we kind of want to understand what it is, and we're thinking maybe we have some postal questions, so I don't like it, so.
Well, I appreciate you
We'll
having me
turn it over.
down. Nice to meet you board members. Dr. Hall, I was regaling Dr. Hall with some stories about the legislation that's in the pipeline right now, which is formidable. There's quite a bit developing. And I mentioned to her that I helped write Ashley's Law. And so she asked if I would come down. This is free of charge, Trent. Trent's always glad
You'll notice next month we made you borrow the money.
I know, I'll leave you okay now, go, got me. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm gonna do a really high 10,000 foot view. tonight, okay? And if you have more questions, I'd be happy to come down. You hold a special place in my heart, Mohammed Seymour does. So, you know, by all means, we're not gonna answer probably all questions you have tonight. We'll do this pretty short and sweet, but there's a lot changing. So what we've got, I've got a couple slides that we can just talk about. Things are changing in the country. So right now, there's a number of states, and District of Columbia allows recreational sales of marijuana. It looks like Illinois is going that way, although we can't be sure, and we certainly don't have any special insight into the way Illinois is going, although that looks likely. So our state color may change to green, but you can kind of see across the country there's some different philosophies. Now, whenever we have a map that looks like that on the country, it's going to impact schools, and this issue is no different than any other. So what we have now, one of the bigger issues in this issue about medical cannabis for adults and students, that's what we'll talk about today, is that there's a few different kinds. There's a kind you get by prescription, and then there's a kind that you can receive over the counter. We can go on Amazon tonight, we could order it, we can go to certain stores, sell it. There's a difference, there's a big distinction between the two. The medical cannabis oil, by prescription, has to be prescribed by a physician licensed to practice medicine in all of its branches. And when you are under age 18 in Illinois, you can only be prescribed medical cannabis for one disabling condition, and that is a seizure disorder. That's it. And the marijuana can only come in one form, and that is oil. So the one kind of common thing that I want to dispel right at the get-go is that students are not going to be smoking, vaping. That isn't the dispensation route. It's only oil. And it's administered topically, usually on the wrists, sometimes on the feet, or orally under the tongue, 2 to 3 drops. Okay, so just by way of background, that gives you a little idea. I think that's really important. And as I go throughout the state and talk to boards and school districts on this topic, it's important to know the strict regulation when it comes to children. Now, adults, we can have 45, 44 disabling conditions, and we can be prescribed medical cannabis for one of all of these different disabling conditions, and we can smoke it and eat it and ingest it in different ways. But that's not how it works for children. So in 2014, Lou Lang, who was at the time one of our state representatives, who's now retired from Skokie, he introduced, and it was passed, the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Pilot Program Act. In it, actually, his first draft had a provision that said that medical cannabis could be stored by school personnel, and it could be administered to children in school. And in 2013-14, when this was on the floor of the legislature here in Illinois, there was some hesitation for it to be in schools, and so that language was removed. And so in 2014, when this act passed, it strictly prohibits, does not allow medical cannabis to be on school grounds. This act right now is scheduled to be repealed in 2020. That commonly happens when you have more controversial subjects in Illinois, and I'll talk a little bit more, the changes afoot on that. So that gives you a little background. Ashley happened, and so Ashley, I'm very honored to, it's a horrible picture of me, I'm very honored to know Ashley and her mom and dad, Jim and Maureen. Ashley is a student in Schaumburg School District 54. Her parents and her identity is, as her parents have identified her for purposes of the media. They filed a friendly lawsuit against Schaumburg School District 54, which happens to be the largest elementary school district in the state, is a client, longtime client. They have about 14,000 students. And they wanted, Ashley had cancer when she was younger. During chemotherapy, her cancer's in remission, but during chemotherapy, she sustained traumatic brain injury and had unrelenting seizures, over 200 a day. So the family called the district in 2017 and asked if Ashley could come to school with a patch of medical cannabis on her foot, and asked whether the nurse could hold it and dispense it to her in school. And the school district was inclined to do this thing until they called me, and I had to say that it was illegal under that statute that we just talked about. So what happened was, long story short, with the help of the family, I guess the family was headed up the kind of initiative. I helped draft Ashley's law, so that was effective August 1st of 18. And it's interesting, it allows parents who have, or guardians, who have children who are prescribed medical cannabis to bring it to school, dispense it to their child, and then leave school immediately. Now, the key is that, which is a good first step, by the way. The problem is that we live in a mostly rural state. We don't think of it necessarily up north. Everybody thinks of Illinois and Chicago. But the key to the administration of medical cannabis to a child with seizure disorder is that it needs to be administered within approximately 2 to 3 minutes of the onset of the seizure. And so I would suggest, even if you lived in the, maybe the new homes that are being built that look beautiful, by the way, right here, you might be able to get to school within 2 to 3 minutes. But unless you lived in those homes that are being built right here, you wouldn't be able to make it to school in time to dispense this to the child. Ashley's Law was importantly, I had language in there that you are not subject to a loss of federal funding. You can decline if the administration would be disruptive to either the educational environment or to other students. School personnel are never required to administer medication, never. You know who you can make do it? Your nurse and an administrator. And so, but teachers are not administering medications. They can volunteer to do so, but they cannot be required to. And a couple other things, students cannot be disciplined and you cannot refuse them enrollment if they are prescribed with medical cannabis. There's very strict requirements for registration with the Illinois Department of Public Health, and the board must adopt a policy. The way the law is currently written is that a school board could decline to adopt policy. They could decide just not to do this. And that's okay too. And again, I represent lots of school districts that have made decisions both ways. So change is happening right now. We've got, it's quick, it's gonna happen very quickly, right? It's kind of like right under our feet. We're looking at possible legalization of recreational marijuana in the state. Again, I don't have any special insight into that, but that's certainly been talked about. We live in a largely rural state, which we've talked about. Ashley's story is very compelling. She went from having over 200 seizures a day to having 0 within about a week of her starting medical cannabis. Modern medicine cannot explain why, and that's because marijuana is a Schedule I drug, and medical testing is not allowed. So it's an interesting kind of thing across the country, but there are lots of students like Ashley. I work with them, I would say, not every week, I would say 1 to 2 times a month I'm working on a situation for an Illinois school district where they have a kiddo like Ashley. The administration routes, as I've described, kind of similar to other medications. There's nothing terribly complicated about it. We've got this interplay now of CBD oils, or cannabis oils that are on the market. There's a difference, by the way, between hemp and cannabis. I'm a master gardener in Illinois, and I never thought that would come in handy to my daytime job. But they're different plants. They're derived. So the cannabis plant is the one with the THC in it, which is the high producer. That's a different plant than a hemp plant, which you can buy fiber with. And we've got the problem in Illinois that nurses are not required in schools. It's a little known fact, but it is true. And it's hard to find nurses in a lot of parts of the state. So we've got some of that change. As far as the proposed changes, so here's the down and dirty. These are not passed yet, by the way. All right, so just I wanted to give you a quick view of what looks like is to come. This is on a fast track for passage. I spoke with Bob Morgan, who's the representative in the House Friday, about what this looks like, and he thinks it'll probably be passed and be at the governor's desk within the month. It might take a different form now, legislation changes over time, but so what the law would do if amended, it would allow schools to store medical cannabis under lock and key, much like the nurse does for Ritalin and Adderall and all these other medications that they dispense. It would allow school administrators and nurses to dispense. Teachers would never be required to do so. Interestingly, it would allow the self-administration of medical cannabis by students under the direct supervision of a nurse or an administrator, so it's kind of interesting. I think this was added in part due to the complexity of the issue and kind of the controversy surrounding it. There's 2 other classes of medicine that can be self-administered by students in Illinois, and that is an asthma inhaler and an EpiPen, so an epinephrine auto-injector. So this would include in the revised law at school, school-related activities before and after school, and on the school bus. Yes, medication administration on the school bus, it's actually a thing, it's very complicated, but it's something that certainly we could deal with and we've dealt with as a district. ISB is going to, the state board that is going to develop a training curriculum, and there would be strict immunity from liability for both school boards and school personnel who are working with students. That is it in a nutshell. This is Senate Bill 455. There's a hyperlink, a PowerPoint to get into it, so you can kind of track it if you wish. Otherwise, I think that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you with that. Does the board have any questions or any issues, based on what I presented, or something maybe you want me to follow up on in relation to this law?
Do you recommend just adopting the policy regarding this that's come out in the press?
I drafted that policy, so.
So you-
I did know that.
So it's probably pretty sketchy.
It just has a press on it, it doesn't say your name, but.
I volunteered I volunteered because I know more about medical cannabis than a 51-year-old woman ever should. So I did volunteer to draft that policy, and so yes, I do recommend it. I think that after 26 years of representing school districts, each board you are uniquely designed and uniquely equipped to make this decision for your community, and it is not for anyone else to judge. That's the board's decision. I think that the changes to the law are going to include a requirement that you adopt a policy. As it stands right now, it's somewhat discretionary, but I think that the change that lies ahead in the next month is going to be mandatory. I do like policy, it's pretty comprehensive, but I try to keep it user-friendly too. Last thing I want is your nurses or your staff members to be confused about it, right? We want to be very clear. I've been fortunate to work with Dr. Hall and some of the district nurses on looking at some drafts of this, because there's a few clients that I use as kind of good test cases and kind of help me read the statute and tell me what you think. So I'm really thankful to the board for allowing me to kind of run it by some of your staff members so that before it hits prime time, I can at least feed in some of their input, which has been really important. I would say that, yes, I would say generally speaking, if it becomes a requirement in each school district, you will be required to adopt that press policy. You'll probably undergo some additional changes. I'm working with the IASB, the Illinois Association of School Boards, is to develop it. I'm working with them right now on some potential revisions if the law changes. And it's coming. I think the one thing I want to leave you with is, even though you may not have any requests right now, certainly you will. And especially a district this size, you are going to get a request. Your neighbors over here, Urbana and Champaign, will likely get the first ones because of their size. But they're so much bigger, but then it's undoubtedly going to trickle down here. Same thing with Schaumburg. It was no surprise to me that first case or situation hit Schaumburg because it is so large. We see it popping up like in Plainfield and Rockford and different kind of larger, what we would call larger areas up there. But yeah, no, good. Any other questions at this point that I can help with? Or again, I will keep Dr. Hall in the loop, as I always do, just about how it develops, and I stand ready to come down free of charge. You can write that down, Trent, to talk more about it if you have any follow-up questions or concerns.
Just to make sure that I understand what you said is, there's no problem with us adopting this now and not waiting for legislation to push through?
That is correct. I would recommend you adopt it now, and then the legislate, as press is kind of designed to do, I think its biggest benefit is that then it updates, it tells you when you need to update the policy or the procedures, and so as long as you stay up to date with press, which I know you do, any changes that happen you can adopt as the months go on. I would, at this point, I do think that it is, it's well written, I wrote it.
Flawless, I'm sure.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, Max, but yeah.
When did we have it as press? Because I remember reading that, like.
Oh, we haven't done it yet.
No, but
Yes.
we saw the access, because I remember Dr. Casson was still on board, like, do you remember when it went to press?
I do, actually. It would have gone to press probably, it's effective in August. It went to press February, maybe January. I think it was slated to go in January.
So the spring sometime.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think that's right. I think that's right. And I think at that time, a lot of school districts, they either weren't dealing with the issue, they didn't have it come up in their community. Totally fine, there's no judgment. You don't have to, at this point, you do, as the world turns right now, you do not have to adopt it. Yeah, I would advocate you do. I respect though that, you know, again, I respect that each community comes at it from a different lens, and I have no, but yes, I do think that it would be, I've worked with hundreds of other school districts and they've not had issues with it, you know, after adoption. I will say that. Sometimes you'll get a policy that gets adopted and there's some little tweaks that it needs, or it's not ready for prime time yet. This one, the statute's pretty straightforward, so. But it's changing, so it'll be interesting. But I'll keep you all apprised. Is that fair? It's good to be here tonight. We have a lot to celebrate, so thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming to our meeting.
Oh, my pleasure, anytime.
Darcy, thank you for being here. Thank you for not billing us.
Thanks, anytime.
Is there anything else you do for us for not billing us? Let us
I'll
know.
figure out. I'll
Yeah.
figure out. I won't run away.
Thank you very much. Okay. Ryan Martin has something to bring to us.
All right, I'm very excited to announce the assistant principal pending approval of our Middletown Prairie next year. His name is Dustin Day. He has been working in the Danville School District for the past 14 years. He has kindergarten and first grade teaching experience for 7 of those years. He has an additional 5 years of experience as a data and instructional facilitator, which translates to an instructional coach and very heavy on the RTI process. And he also has 2 years of administrative experience through being an administrative intern, which basically means he was an assistant principal on a teacher's salary for 2 years. So he has done everything that an assistant principal would do in those 2 years. Dustin is married to Danielle, who is a Muhammad alum, and has also taught in Muhammad in the past. The same one was here, and they have 3 boys, and they are looking at houses now to move to Muhammad. So we're very excited to have Dustin join us here at Middletown Prairie.
I just want to tell you, good evening, board. I just want to say that I'm very excited to see my name on your agenda tonight. Muhammad has an amazing reputation, and I'm really excited to be part of it. I would like to show some gratitude to my wife, who's always been there for me, and I would like to show thank you to Mr. Martin for bringing my name to your ears, and also the staff that was part of the interview committee. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to serve the students of MPE and the staff and Mr. Martin and the community.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve Dustin Day as a Middletown Prairie Assistant Principal as has been presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Second. Discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Larson?
Yes.
Hendricks?
Yes.
Giles?
Yes.
Hennessy?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes?
Schultz?
Yes.
McComb?
Yes. Congratulations.
Scary, procedural.
Very good.
How tall are you? Just ask.
I believe at one time I was the largest kindergarten teacher in the state.
I had a really tall principal when I was a kid, Mr. Sturgeon, and I just would be like, yes, sir. So, maybe good.
All
Next
right.
up is Christine Northrup.
I am very excited to recommend Marissa Hill as the new coordinator of student services for the district. Marissa grew up in Toledo, Illinois. She earned her bachelor's of science degree in special education from the University of Illinois in Champaign in 2003 and has 2 education master's degrees from UIUC, one as a curriculum adaptation specialist in special education in 2009 and the other in education and organizational leadership in 2014. Marissa has held a variety of roles in the Department of Special Education in our district since she was hired in 2004. She was the junior high life skills teacher and created the Bulldog Buddy program, has taught kindergarten special education, and spent the last year as our instructional coach in special education.
Currently, Marissa lives in Tolona with her husband and 2 children, Knox, who is 3, and Scarlett, who is 1. She enjoys spending time with her extended family, taking day trips to see and try new things with her children, and continuing her own education as she is again taking some graduate level classes in pursuit of her Director of Special Education endorsement. Marissa is excited to begin her work and her new position and continue to grow as an educator in the Mahomet Seymour Schools.
Okay, so I don't have anything prepared, but I just want to say thank you to Lindsay for hiring me back in 2004. That was a good hire. And I just have been given lots of opportunity in this district, and it's been great to be able to grow and to continue to hone my craft as I go. So I just really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve Marissa Hill as Coordinator of Student Services as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
I am wondering when we, or not we, maybe, the board, approved this new administrative position.
I shared it with the board, I'd have to say early April.
Can you speak to why there was no resume or application in the board packet?
As an internal applicant, Marissa, first of all, was the only applicant, and we also shaped this position around her qualifications. We also were in desperate need of this position as well, so she brought the qualifications and the skill set that we needed to bring this coordination together of student services. So it was run by the board.
Before April too. We talked about it prior to that.
I can't remember the date, honestly.
I mean, we talked about it with our funding formula and how it fit the needs of some of the evidence-based funding and targeting our students' needs.
Also had a couple conversations with the MSCA about it as well. The job was properly posted for 5 days. All the requirements were followed.
So when we as a district are looking at adding a new administrative position, is that the typical process that it just gets discussed to the board one-on-one? Or was that discussed in an open meeting? How was that planning done, I guess?
This is the only time that I can think of that I've done that, so I can't speak to prior practice. But I did run it by the board individually and talked with board members about it. It was not discussed in an open meeting. If it's the will of the board to change that, then we can look at a different way to go.
Any other questions?
Was there a reason that that application wasn't required?
I think Marissa's work history and her qualifications speak for themselves. She's a known quantity. She's a valued employee for 15 years.
I've not met Ms. Hill, but I've heard nothing but great things about her and the work she's done. So I'm very grateful for her.
I also have heard great things.
Yeah. So financially, what kind of impact is that going to have on our administrative costs?
So I shared that. I think if you look at the administrative overall, down on the item number 11, I think it says that overall our administrative costs, so I'm just going to scroll down there so I can speak correctly to the.
So their full administrative costs go down next year.
I just want to say the right thing. So our administrative costs for FY20 are actually $4,879 less than FY19. So we're adding an administrator and saving essentially almost $5,000.
That's great. Are we having people retire or what?
So Mr. Starwald's retiring, Mr. Chief is leaving. Those people were replaced with frankly lower cost administrators. Marissa's being paid $13,000 more than her teacher salary to work more and basically take on a whole lot more work. So you can still back out. So I mean, I think it was a fiscally responsible decision and something that, a position that we were pretty desperate in terms of coordinating a number of really important things that really directly touch students, our pre-K program, oversight of 504 plans, oversight of Atlas and Compass. Marissa's gonna evaluate teachers. That takes some teaching load off of our principals.
And those, a lot of those duties were Ms. Northrup's, is that correct?
They were spread out among a variety of people. And so it does bring the, you know, again, as student services coordinator, bringing these things under the umbrella of responsibility of one person, hopefully improve the delivery of those services, improve communication, and certainly some things are coming off of a number of administrators' plates.
I seem to recall that the position itself being consolidated in that way would have a high value for the EBF funding formula.
Sure, yep. I can just, as an educator who does not work in this district any longer because I'm on the school board, but I work with early childhood population, and the incidence rate of autism is immensely expensive, and it's much more cost involved to educating children. And if our district has always been known for being valued for special ed, I would be happy that we're proactive in being prepared for the incidents that may come our way, because I can just say in my education and my experience that the needs of kids are greater and they're being targeted earlier so that they can help them have greater outcomes in life.
Certainly Marissa seems, we've heard all this great evidence that she seems great, and I have no concerns at all about her, but I really feel I must express that I do have a concern about a new administrative position that's added without a discussion in a board meeting. I mean, even a closed session board meeting, which I guess is inappropriate to discuss there. But I feel as though we should have discussions in open before we add an administrative position to our district.
Thank you.
Instead of just.
That's the flip side. I don't know if it's appropriate to say, but I do recall Dr. Northrup, or Christine Northrup, being up there and sharing about this kind of information coming about, and when she was here, I thought it was in an open meeting.
I think that what we're just saying is that there was no vote, and so when we're adding administrative positions, it would be nice to actually go through the formal process of having, you know, that formality and voted on in the board.
So we have not voted to add teaching positions. So I think this is a broader board discussion, just to talk about generally how you'd like to proceed in the future.
Yeah, and please don't take this is
Please,
just,
yes.
we just had some questions because in our packet there were some, you know, resumes and applications and some not, so we were just trying to understand the difference. Okay.
I just, as you apply internally, it just submits your name because they already have all the credentials.
So the materials that we have would be approximately 15 years old on her, which I didn't think was relevant. I thought that the biography that Mrs. Northrop provided was far more.
Just wanted to know why the difference.
Right, I'm happy to provide those answers for you.
Okay.
And it's sometimes, I think just as a transparency issue for the public to understand the difference between when we seem to decide a position before we post it, and some are posted internal and some are external, and there's different criteria for applying, and I just feel like an open and transparent policy.
We don't have different criteria for applying. Everybody has to apply through the AppleTrack online application system.
Well, I guess the writing in the application for some jobs say you must submit an online application, and some say submit an email of interest, right? I mean, just as the public looking at that, they would not understand.
I can't off the top of my head think of a position other than maybe a stipend or a coaching position where we say email.
This position actually said
okay.
an email of interest to Christine Northrup was the only.
Got it.
Now, maybe she filled an application, I have no idea what happened, but I'm just saying as a transparency issue, is nothing to do with this hire, it's just as a policy, I feel that.
Specific to
Right, I just wanna keep saying that because I understand that we're talking about policy, but there's a real life human being here with feelings that I wanna just keep saying over and over again, that it's not anything, this is nothing to do with you at all, it's just, feel very strongly we should
So
talk
that's
about
a
this as a board.
Absolutely, so that's a great discussion for the board to have. Moving ahead.
Further questions or comments? We've got a motion and a second. We've had discussion. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Hennessy,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
McCall.
Yes. Item 4, approval of Chad Benedict as high school principal. Dr. Hall.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Chad Benedict. I wasn't going to stand at the podium, you can just stand up. Mr. Benedict emerged as our top candidate this past week for the position of high school principal, so I'm pleased to recommend him. Chad has worked here for 13 years and past year as assistant principal at the high school. Prior to that, physical education teacher, and for 6 years as division head as well of the PE and fine arts division. He also served as our varsity basketball coach during the time that he was here, and prior to that, taught and coached in Chrisman, Illinois. So he's here tonight with his wife Becky and 3 very patient kids who we have to get out of here. But congratulations to you, Chad.
Just want to thank Dr. Hall and for the opportunity to stand up here. It's an honor to get this privilege to lead such a fine school and to work for a district that promotes growth. I've had the pleasure to work with some amazing people in my 13 years here that have helped me grow. I could not have achieved where I'm at today without Mr. Cheek and his vision. He was my mentor when I came into the district when I was hired 13 years ago. And he's been mentoring me ever since. And as I've told him, he will continue to mentor me.
It's not being released.
Ryan Martin was an assistant for me for 12 years on the basketball program, has been a close friend and mentor as well. So I think, I've been fortunate to have good people in my time here at Mahomet. Mr. Hensley certainly has been working close with athletics, and then administratively this year has been a huge influence as well. And last but not least, Nathan Mills has been a wonderful resource for me this year as I transitioned and will continue to transition in leading the high school. So thanks again for the opportunity.
Superintendent recommends Board of Education approve Chad Benedict as the high school principal as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
A raise. Colleen, discussion.
So I had a chance to sit in on the interviews and heard from 4 very strong candidates. And I just wanted to say that I think Mr. Benedict is an outstanding choice for this position. And I also wanted to applaud Dr. Hall for a very good process in the interview process. There was a good cross-section of people from across the district, good discussion, and so I just want to say thank you for that. That was very well done.
Thanks for your time too. Thank you.
I would also just like to note that in our last meeting, we had a public comment when no one even knew that he had applied for the job or was a candidate. And so it was nice to hear from the public when it wasn't even a candidate, how great he was at his job. And so it makes me extra happy to bring him aboard.
We've had a motion and a second. We've had discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
McCall.
Yes. Congratulations.
And I think we should have Marissa.
I do too.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, don't Mr.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
You gotta save the best for last. My family is here tonight, so the journey was definitely not complete without them. So thanks very much.
family.
Approve and leave, that's what they do. Dr. Rummel, math textbook.
I'm back this month. Last month, I presented the discrete math textbook, which has been at the library. This is the book that was recommended by the high school math department for our new math course, discrete math. So that's what I don't have a presentation since I presented last month, but this is the recommendation to the board, is to approve this textbook for the new class at the high school.
Superintendent recommends Board of Education approve the math textbooks as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
That was Merle. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Can you say a little more about how the textbook was chosen?
How this textbook
Yeah.
specifically was chosen?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So discrete math is a pretty unique class. There's not a lot of high schools that offer it. You'll find it mostly in the suburbs. Elizabeth, that will be teaching the class, and we contacted several different schools to find out what textbooks they're using. I believe it was 12 books. We ended up making contact with those schools, finding out the positives, the negatives about that, and in the end, after reviewing those, this came out as one that really met the requirements, I guess you could say, for the class or the intent of our class, meaning this will be a fourth year math class for seniors who've completed Algebra 2 that are most likely college bound and want to continue with that fourth year of math but are not interested in taking an honors class. So right now after Algebra 2 we only offer honors level courses at the high school, and this gives another option for those students.
Pretty thick book, they can get through it.
No, so I think I'd be disappointed if they did. Most of the time, textbooks are written well beyond what you could cover in a year or sometimes even 2 years. So she's got some time this summer that she'll be working on putting together the units.
Yeah, it's not so discreet for discrete math.
Yeah. Well, there's some white space in it.
I know.
So she'll be working on that. The recommendation is to purchase this as an ebook. It will not be an interactive ebook. It's a Stagnant book. It's going to cost approximately $40 a book. Then we'll own each of those licenses for the books that we purchase. So it will not be it's not a reoccurring cost. It's not a renewal cost. It's one time.
Can you say, how do students connect to the book? Do they have to have an internet connection, or is
Not
it
with
a
this
downloaded
one.
file?
This will be a downloaded file. Jared and I will be working on that. And by Jared and I mean Jared.
And is there a limit to how long you could use the book and the license?
No, we own each of those. So it
Okay.
comes like in the form, you have the option, this is old school. Remember I said this is a small publisher compared to like your Pearsons, your HMHs, McGraw-Hills. We have the option to a CD-ROM or a USB.
And do you know if part of the license, we have the option to print a text or a physical copy if we'd like?
I think you could print sections of it. I don't think it would be responsible to print the entire text. I think if we have a hard copy.
Sure.
I think if we got into a situation where we needed more than one hard copy, they're not going to be expensive to get from a third party, and I would purchase another book if needed.
I'm just curious if there are students that want a physical copy, could they print it out? That's something you see a lot of universities.
I suppose they could.
Okay.
Sometimes textbooks have a restriction on those.
Gotcha. So it's really hard to say, like I said, because this is just a small company. It's a kind of old school in how they do things.
And is this just one section? I mean, how many
We're
sections?
having 2 sections.
Two sections. So, like 60 students, or
I'll tell you exactly how
something
many
around
we
there?
have. Right now, we are ordering 55 copies for the 2 sections.
And so, what would the cost be to order physical books that stay at school and then the online version for home? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that while they're in class, they would have a physical book if they wanted one, or?
Yeah, so we can order physical copies. You're gonna pay more for the physical copy, and that's why we went with the ebook, since we already have the Chromebooks. I wanna say
I'd have to go back and look, I don't remember exactly what the cost was. But that was part of the discussion that we had when we were talking with the high school math teachers in terms of the hard books that we bought last year with the math adoption. Those are not utilized. So it didn't make sense to purchase double so that they had both an ebook and a hard book when there was a significant cost increase to doing so. When we purchased the math books last year, I want to say we got the books for like $6 a book. So it was okay when we were new and not knowing if kids were going to prefer the hard copy or the ebook to be able to do both when it's $6, but when it's basically buying duplicates, I wouldn't, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I wouldn't recommend that. And the kids are just not utilizing the hard books. It tends to be the adults that feel more comfortable with that. We talked about it at the leadership team. It came up because that was one of the questions from parents that are on that team, was saying, well, is there a hard book option? And the teachers at the high school were saying, well, we have the hard books now and kids aren't using them. They just, as little as they can.
Is the online version similar to like the CPM books that are being used now? And I know my son loves the online version because it gives you the answers when you're clicking through. So I'm just wondering if maybe that plays into, is that the same type of thing? Will they have that same?
So most of your math, I mean, it's not going to be any different than your hard book. That's going to have your odd answers in the back of the book. So that will be the same. It's not going to have this book is not, from my understanding, is not as interactive as like the science materials that we're adopting. You're getting a CD-ROM. You're basically getting a
digital version
like a
of
digital
that.
version of the PDF is a great way to think of it. It's not interactive. It's not going to be updated.
And how long are you adopting this for, asking us to adopt this for?
So right now, we try to keep everything on an 8-year rotation. So we own that USB when we have it. So we can use it for the 8 years or as long as we need to.
Do you know if the team, so talking about trends in textbooks, something you see at the university, for example, is more and more professors going to free and Creative Commons textbooks. Do you know if the team looked at like Oscar Levin's Discrete Mathematics? It's an open, free textbook.
We looked at a lot of ebooks, both, I mean, last year with the math, this year with the science, and this year with the other. I'll be honest, the open source materials at the K-12 level are not as comprehensive or as good as some of the open source materials that maybe they have at the college level, but we continually look at that to see if that is an option, and they're just, right now for us and what we need, they're just not as good of an option. You don't always have the resource too that you get with the materials, not necessarily the discrete math, but with some of the bigger publishers. You have other resource materials that come with that that you don't necessarily get with the open source materials.
Right, but with this one, it's a, like you said, it's a dead text, it's a static copy. So, okay. Okay.
Any other questions? Roll call vote, please.
Schultz,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Hennessy, yes, Hendricks,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes.
Dr. Romo, science books.
I'm back for science. So we have a countertop of science textbooks up here. So as we talked in the last board meeting, 612, Burke team's recommending the HMH product, which is an online book. It is interactive. It is updated on a regular basis. It comes with a teacher. You purchase a teacher resource kit that comes with that. That includes some other supplemental resources for the teachers to use as part of their curriculum in their classroom. It's got some great accessibility features with it that the special ed staff particularly appreciated, to which general ed teachers chimed in and said, that's good for all kids. So the ability, one feature that they really like that is the ability to take notes. So you can, just like you would do within Google Sheets or within Google Docs, you're able to make a note and pop it, but then you're also able to tab through all of your notes. So if a student's studying for an exam or studying for a final, they're able to tab through their notes instead of, I know sometimes when I go to high school, I'll see some kids that use literal Post-it notes within their hard books as kind of their notes and flip through that. And so there's an easy way to do that. There's the live dictionary. You can highlight a word and give them the meaning of that word. It reads the text to them. There's just a lot of nice features with that textbook and resource online. For the AP classes for bio and chemistry, and also for the anatomy and physiology, those books we're able to purchase from a third-party vendor. Purchase them that way for about $50 less a textbook. And I just can't match it with the ebooks. I know the kids don't like the heavy books, but I can't match the cost to make it feasible to do an ebook for those. Additionally, those publishers, especially like for Pearson, they won't let us go out. They won't let me do more than a 6-year adoption for those particular books. So we'd either have to look at doing a 6-year and a 2-year, or 2 4-year adoptions. The longer you go out, for example, like with the HMH, the longer you go out, the less you pay for each year of your subscription, because they know they have you for that period of time. So the recommendation is to keep the hard textbooks for those 3 classes. Questions?
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the science textbooks as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
So when I was looking at the science books at the library, it looked like there was a package that you were able to get the printed material along with the online version of the material. Did we look at that?
For the HMH, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, so yes and no. The HMH materials are online. It's an online interface. They have a workbook option that you can purchase in addition to the online materials. When you purchase the workbooks, you'll notice like on this one here for the junior high, it'll say like B. So each 1 year of junior high covers 3 units, the other 2 grades in junior high teach 4 units within that. Each of the workbooks is $20. It doubled the cost of the subscription for the adoption to purchase the workbooks with that. The workbooks are online, so they can take their notes and do all of that within the e-book subscription. That is part of that. They just won't have the physical workbook like you would have. I think the easiest way to think of it is like the Go Math workbooks, where the kids have those workbooks that they work in. Here they'd just be doing it online through Google Classroom.
I'm just gonna say, I have a real concern here about an online book, and I have even more concern about an 8-year adoption. I don't think it's any secret that screen time is kind of one of the things that's been real concerning for me. I did a little bit of research in preparation for this, and there's some pretty significant studies coming out that directly correlate a whole bunch of things to hours of screen time that kids are in front of. And I just think it's a real mistake to commit ourselves to an online-only tool, given that all of the research that comes out that's associated with, I'll just go through some of these graphs. The percentage of kids who are not curious or interested in learning new things by age level, with comparison to the hours of screen time, these lines just go up in a very significant way, with anything over 1 hour of screen time per day. The studies show that kids from 11 to 17 are actually much more impacted than kids at lower levels, which I kind of found interesting. But the correlation between these things and the amount of screen time is significant across all different age groups, but is almost a direct Mount Everest climb when you're looking from the 11 to the 17-year-olds.
This is the same thing when we talk about percentages of kids who do not stay calm when challenged. There's the same kind of direct correlation between more than 1 hour of screen time and the instances of the percentage of kids who really struggle with those types of things. Same thing with percentage of kids who don't finish tasks, who argue with caregivers, who are diagnosed with anxiety or depression. And let's see, the percentage of kids receiving mental health treatment and the percentage of taking medication for psychological issues. You know, I think that this study should cause us all to take a real strong look at the tools that we're picking for the kids and whether or not those tools are actually in the best interest of the kids. I know that a lot of times we have to kind of vote with our pocketbooks, but I'm not really comfortable voting with my pocketbook if it's going to be detrimental to the student population. And this is just an initial study. There are more studies going on. This is it's a long-term study, but this is kind of preliminary findings. But there's no doubt that the more that our kids spend time in front of screens, the more problems that we're having them face. This actually was a study that separated out kids with ADHD or autism. So it was not a study that kind of took those factors in. I think that what we'll find is that it really exacerbates that whole issue for some kids that have different challenges, but that was actually something that they factored out for this study. And so I just have a real concern about how we're selecting a tool that seems to lock us in for 8 years, which means the current 4th grade class is locked into this online-only tool through them graduating from high school. And I think that what we are going to find through those 8 years are more studies like this that are going to be even more concerning. And I just would like to look at an option, especially for something that's, science is a tactile practice. I mean, science is experiments, and I think that if that I saw the teacher version, I think the content of the books looked great. I have a real concern with the delivery method of these books, and I just can't see voting for an online-only tool that locks us in for this amount of time with these kinds of reports that are being presented to us all the time.
So I read recently about the American Academy of Pediatrics making recommendations about screen times and talking about their concerns about screen times. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Dr. Hendricks, do you have an opinion on what they had to say about screen time?
I can't say that I have studied the evidence enough to support yay or nay on that.
That's what I would like to know is what is the evidence in the team of people that pick this material and, what is evidence-based practice going through this curriculum?
So,
And you
I'm just
presented
gonna
this
speak,
to
yeah, well.
within our, buildings.
So the content itself, it's the way that the curriculum, the materials are put together. It's not designed for the kids to just sit in front of the material. It's a lot less reading than with a traditional textbook where you might have pages and pages and pages of reading. So it's set up, there might be like a short video, and then there's opportunity for kids to talk. Or there's some guiding questions that the kids might work through in small groups. They will have what they call an evidence notebook, which is either a spiral bound notebook or something they can take notes in Google. However that teacher chooses to set that up, whether she chooses for it or he chooses for it to be a paper pencil or the other. But it's not, it is designed for more interaction. There are opportunities for experiments. It's more of a discussion and less, I don't want to say less content, but it is less content, and that was part of what came up in the discussion. And the feedback from the high school staff was, it's not the content that's important, it's their ability to think and reason and problem solve, and that was one of the things that they liked about this particular resource was that it kind of reduced some of the content and provided more opportunities for discussion and talking and thinking and reasoning.
So that's interesting. And did your team have a chance to look at Ed Report's analysis of curriculum modules?
So we looked at some of them, but I will say, I've looked at Ed Reports a lot. I looked at it with the math adoption, I've looked at it in previous districts. I'm not gonna lie, some of it's flawed. You're only looking at certain pieces. When you get to a certain point, you stop. They don't examine the other areas if one area scores poorly. And this is just one resource. This isn't the entire piece of what teachers use to build a curriculum. And so I think that also that's something that Ed Reports does not take into consideration either. Our Go Math does not get solid greens on that, but that is what the teachers are very comfortable with that. They supplement with lots of manipulatives, they supplement with other resources as part of that curriculum.
So I bring it up because when you dig down into what Ed Reports says about HMH's module and to why they get the rating they get, they were happy with the breadth of topics, but they were concerned with how the 3 dimensions of the NGSS standards are being applied for that curriculum, and things like engineering practices, and I mean, and it sounds like that's what you were saying that the teachers thought was a strength of HMH's.
In the way that they'll utilize it. I will say, I mean, Jeremy Davis was on that committee. He was one in the state that kind of led that and knows a lot about it. He felt very comfortable with this product, felt that it was much stronger than any of the other products that we looked at. The other thing that the committee really liked was something that was consistent and provide some continuity from 6th grade to high school. This is one of the few products where you're gonna have the same platform for bio, chem, earth science, and physics. Earth science is one that is often left out of that high school grouping. A lot of times you'll find, like with Inspire, you can get biochem physics, but you can't get the earth science piece to it.
I guess I'd like to call the question, if the committee of teachers made a decision and that's, we want our staff to feel respected and empowered to move forward on a textbook, and they've, I mean, 6 and a half dozen, I want to respect that decision that they have to choose what they think is best for their students. They are the experts at teaching them, we are not. We can look at research and data, and I appreciate that very much, but like, you've got Jeremy Davis, you gave his credentials, you've given him this opportunity to choose this. I would like to have him feel supported in that, because we're trusting him to educate our children.
So I made a lot of effort to reach out to teachers across the board on this topic, because like Megan said, I'm concerned that it's such a long-term commitment for us. And the response that I got was pretty mixed. There were some that were very happy with the decision and felt the communication process and everything was great. There were some that didn't. And so it's kind of hard to say exactly what the overall picture is there.
Well, I'm gonna trust what she says, what Jeremy says.
I'm not saying I don't trust what she's saying, but I'm saying that it's part of our responsibility to make sure that this is a wise decision for 8 years and
We got textbooks that are way
$90,000.
older than 8 years in our building now, though.
So I did offer, because the committees meet every 4 years. So we talked about, do you want to do this in 4 years? And I can only speak to the people that actually responded, but the responses were, no, we do, it ran the committee for the entire year. And they would it takes 2-3 years to really get comfortable with materials, feel like you've got things down. They were not looking forward to going through this process again in 4 years.
And is there a way, I don't know how the subscription agreement looks, but is there a way to back out of it if we get a couple of years into it and the teachers say, you know what, now that we're actually using it in the classroom, this is just not working, or?
Not with an 8-year, you're
Not
getting the
with an 8-year.
discount because of the 8-year subscription. So if you do 2 years, you're gonna pay more per year
Yeah.
to do that, but you're locked in then for the 2 years. You can always go back and get the workbooks. If you can always add to, you just can't take away. So if in 2 years in, you decide we we wanna add the workbooks, the kids, you know, we feel like that's something that we need and want, we can add the workbooks.
So I think that it's just a little bit of my concern with what Megan has said about screen time and if that becomes problematic. You know, I understand as an economist that once we pay this price, it's a sunk cost. It's not relevant to any rational discussion from then on, right, with what we're gonna do. But we also know there's a whole field of behavioral economics that says people don't act rational with these types of decisions. And so if in, say, 4 years, studies come out and say how horrible screen time is, I wonder if we will then just say, well, 4 more years of kids have to suffer, or if we'll be able to be responsive to that, because people don't tend to make decisions once the money is there. And so I'm a little concerned about our decisions for kids throughout the future if we lock ourselves in so long. And I would be interested to know how much the differential is to go with shorter contracts.
Do you happen to know that?
No, I went with the committee, I'm sorry, I went with the
That's okay.
committee's recommendations,
That's
we
okay.
asked for 8, and that's what I got the quote on.
Sure.
And I guess to my point, the science textbook is just one class, and it's not that I don't trust the teachers. I'm sure the teachers did a great job of looking at this, but they're thinking about their single class. And we as the board need to do a job that says over the life of the 7 hours that we have these kids in this building, what does this look like for them and what are the tools that they are using? Because it's very clear that screen time is adding to some of our behavioral issues, is adding to kids not being able to stay on task, is adding to people being disrespectful. And I mean, all of these graphs show that all of the behavioral things that we are seeing, and I keep hearing teachers say, I've just never seen anything like it. It's spiking, it's spiking, it's spiking, and I can't really explain why. I think that the screen time is the answer. Now, how we solve that is going to be very tricky because kids have screen time at home, kids have screen time at school. But I think if we are going to do this properly, we owe these kids, as the adults in the room, a comprehensive view and to make a decision that is in their best interest. They will tell you they like the screen because they have shortening of their frontal cortex because screen time is doing that to them. And they would much rather have something say, what is the answer to this, and click it, because that is what we have addicted them to. So I'm sure the kids will say, yeah, that sounds great. But there are long-term effects that we have to, as the adults, say, this might not be the best thing for these kids. And over the whole day, you know, we just have more Chromebook use, we have more online use, and it's kind of terrifying to me that 0 to 1 hour was the area that you weren't affected. And so the chances of us getting a kid with 0 to 1 hour of screen time is about nil, just because of the world that we live in. So I would like to look at the tools that we are adding to the curriculum, and that's the other question that I asked, and I know that you said to me in the email that that's something that the team is working on, but without really understanding how this tool is going to be added into the curriculum and what that's going to look like, this 8-year commitment has me worried. And then on top of that, this is not just a science class that we're talking about. We're talking about 6th through 12th graders whose primary tool right now is a Chromebook. And we have screen time issues, and I just have some real concerns that it's a hard discussion to have and it's a hard thing to do, but I think we have to have it. I think we owe it to the kids to figure out if there are paper tools available and if that is a better option when we think about what we add to our curriculum.
I think we have to be careful about putting all our eggs into one basket, so to speak, as far as saying that there's all these behavior problems and it's related to screen time. There's a lot of variation or a lot of variables that go into what affects behavior, whether it's home environment, whether it's I mean, any number of things. I mean, we've got increasing levels of depression and anxiety at the college level, and I see that a lot in the student athletes there. It's not just because they've been on screens. There's other issues there. So I think we have to be careful about that. And the body of evidence will always tend to change. One thing I always happen to think about, and if you ask about the medical aspect of it, is that, and I'm gonna get pretty technical here, but they used to say beta blockers were contraindicated in people with heart failure. They thought it would kill them. Well, actually it saved their lives if they started taking beta blockers. So that body of evidence changed from the point where I was in medical school to when I was in residency. So I think, you know, the evidence is great. We can make decisions based on what we have in front of us, but it's gonna change. I mean, there's gonna be new studies that come out. So all we have is what's here. And I think that we just have to be careful about interpreting it down to a few studies.
Well, and I'm sorry if I made the impression that it's only screen time, but I think there's no doubt that screen time has an impact. And so what I'm saying is when we're struggling with all these other things, I think screen time has to be something that we actually start discussing and looking at as we make decisions, because we know that there is a contributive factor with screen time and these other issues that we're seeing. So I wasn't saying it's the only issue. Certainly it's not the only issue.
Right, there's certainly plenty of other variables, but I think even that, I mean, yes, as a school board, is that a responsibility that we have? But it's our parents have a responsibility to get your kids off Fortnite, you know what I mean? Yeah, I'd rather have them on a screen looking at a textbook rather than I would have them playing Fortnite. So, I don't know, I'm not sure I buy into it, but.
So one of the other criticisms I wrote about for HMH is one of the focuses of NGSS, as you know, but maybe the folks don't, is for hands-on discovery of scientific phenomena.
Sure.
And one of the criticisms was that HMH's program relies a lot on virtual models of a phenomenon, as opposed to 10 years ago when we were in school or longer, where kids are actually doing experiments with physical things and learning from the observations that they can make with a hands-on approach, like NGSS is going for.
So I think there's kind of two separate things there. So one is the NGSS, which is kind of suggests that units or lessons within those units are built around a bigger phenomenon. So some of those things you can't necessarily do when they set it up in here, you couldn't really see a tanker implode because that would be dangerous in the classroom.
Sure.
So they have videos and things like that, but there are still opportunities for the teachers to bring in some of the experiments and some of the other things that they do within the class to bring it down to a more 6th grade, 7th grade level where they would be able to do hands-on experiments. I don't think any of that in and of itself is going away. You know, years ago there was that push of, you know, not only project-based learning, but also lab time. But the research tells us now that that's not really, it's not necessarily all of that lab time. It's not more is better. It's the ones that you do, doing them really well and talking and understanding. I think we all did experiments in grade school and we never understood why it worked or what happened behind it or the science or the chemistry behind it. And so I think one of the nice things about this is focusing on one or two things, bringing a couple of experiments into the classroom and really understanding the reasoning why that's happening instead of just more and more.
So books are just a tool, right? One of the many tools that you use in a curriculum. So with it being May 20th, and it being about to be summer, and then the teachers will have a life in the summer, how is the timing gonna work with having, you know, like, I'm a teacher, I know what it's like to adopt a new textbook, and it's a lot of work. And so I wonder how that's gonna work.
So ideally, we're gonna have this to the board in March, but as with all things, it doesn't go as planned. So here we are. If all goes well, they have training scheduled on Wednesday to get into the textbook and to learn it, and they have some paid time this summer to work on alignment and working with that, just as they do for the discrete math class. We've always offered that. That's a great question.
So can we call the question or?
Yep. But you gotta quit talking when you call the question. You wanna call the question. Okay, we've had discussion, we had the question called.
So we're gonna vote on calling the question?
No. We don't have to vote on calling the question. Calling the question takes us to the vote. That's,
That was 2/3 majority for moving the previous motion.
my understanding, once we call the question, we go to a vote. Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Keith,
No.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy,
No.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
No.
Giles,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Dr. Romo, can you do the Title I school waiver?
I can.
And then after that,
I can.
and then after that, we are gonna take a 5-minute break.
All right, so, are you sure you want me to continue?
Go ahead.
All right, so, last year, we brought you the school-wide waiver. We have to bring that to the board every year. Basically, if the poverty rate for the building falls within 20 and 40%, you can request the waiver for school-wide. You don't have to request the waiver if your free and reduced lunch rate is over 40%. So we are requesting the waiver for next year, as we did this past year for Lincoln Trail and Middletown Prairie. This is important because this allows us to use the title funds on all students and not just at-risk students. So for things like the lit library, we can allow all students to use the books out of the lit library instead of only at-risk students using that. It also takes some financial restrictions off of us for supplement versus supplant. So we are actually able to take title funds and use those for items that we had typically used district funds for in the past. We are not able to do that if we do not have a school-wide waiver. So at the junior high and high school, when we use the funds, we're using them in addition to other district funds, and we're targeting those dollars towards an at-risk population.
So is there a reason we don't do it at the junior high and high school as well?
Most of our title dollars go to the elementary level. So we do spend some out there. Last year, we used some title money we used it for the textbooks, for the math textbooks. And then we also used it for the Khajiits that we purchased for the junior high and high school for internet access.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the Title I school-wide waiver as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Further questions or discussion?
Can I just ask a question, it's not for tonight, but for the future? Is there any way that you could provide us with sort of a list of what Title I funds go to, or what you're using them for?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't wanna put you on the spot now, because that's an unreasonable question to ask on the spot, so if you should just at some
So
point in the future.
there's always a budget, there's a budget detail page for each title grant, and so I would be happy to provide you this past year's. You can have an idea of what we spent the money on this past year, and then I can do the same when we get to that point. They've changed the grant process for this year, and we're required to do additional work before Christine and I can apply for our grants, which is a consolidated grant application process, and we're working through that. And when we get through that, eventually, they'll release our title funds for us then, and I can share the budget detail with you.
Sure, that'd be great, thanks.
Yes.
Any other questions or discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Giles,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes?
Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. All right, it's getting late. We have a long ways to go, so we're gonna do a couple things here. We're gonna take a 5-minute recess. Before we do that, when we come back from recess, we're gonna take the item 12, because those folks have been here and they're patiently waiting. We're gonna move them up next on the docket in front of Nathan, okay? So 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back with item 12, and then get back on the item.
I'm good.
No, you go first, I'll go
The record reflect it's 9:25. We are back in open session. And I misspoke, it's item 11 that we have to move up, Trent?
Yes.
Okay. 12. So item 11 is what we've got people waiting on to present that we're gonna go ahead and move up. So let's go with item 11. No, 11's contracts.
It's different in here than on the other one. Okay, so here's why. There's two different agendas, that's why.
Oh.
That's why it's the
Mine-
same in the beginning. I mean, it's the same
agenda, there's an 8 next to discussion right here.
So you didn't go, so the numbers are off.
All
That's why
right, so the
everything-
item we're moving up is approval of food service management contract, correct?
Correct.
No matter what item it is on your agenda, approval of food service management contract is next up.
Correct.
Okay,
Shall we?
go ahead.
All right, so every 5 years, we are required to bid out food service contracts since we are to use a food service management company for our food service program. Again, since it's over $25,000, school code does require us to go through that bid process. Like anything else, it's over $25,000, with the exception of some exclusions. But the school code, it also does say that we would award the food service management contract to the lowest responsible bidder. State Board of Education, they do basically dictate how the bid process works. They provide a template that's about 135 pages. It's really comprehensive and it lays it all out there for you. You customize the bid document itself to fit your needs. But again, for the most part, they provide that template. And then there's 3 large submissions. They provide every step along the way in approval of each of the multiple step process. So we began our bid process back in February of 2019 with the submission of our bid document to ISBE for review. They came back right away, said, yep, it looks good, you're good to go. So we put that out there and we're required to then email or somehow provide the food service bid to a minimum of 5 companies in Illinois and throughout the Midwest. So we did that. We had a bid opening April 29. Excuse me, and we had 3 bids, Arbor Management, of course, Aramark, who has been our existing food service contractor, and Avions. We can throw up the bid criteria summary real quick. Should have did that first. It's basically a breakdown of the Thank you. Has the breakdown of each of the 3 bids. This is one of the documents required by ISBE. But what this shows is for each of the 3 bidders, they did all pass the bid responsiveness criteria. Again, all of those for which we were specific with Muhammad Seymour's specific information. Arbor Management came in at low bid. It was at that point that we kind of did our due diligence, called references and that kind of thing. And they came out low, again, outbidding Aramark, who has been here for quite a while. But we do have 3 representatives from Arbor Management: Jeff Kraus, the VP of Sales, Jada Luderbach, the District Manager, thank you. And Christina Klein, the Food Service Director, currently in Morton, actually. So I was going to allow them some time to discuss the transition and what they have in store for Muhammad Seymour.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight. Again, my name is Jeff Kraus. I am the Vice President of Sales for Arbor Management. And in case you're not familiar with Arbor Management and who we are, in the 70s and the 80s, there was a company called Service Systems. And that was actually the largest contract food service company in the country. And in 1985, that company got bought out by a company called Sodexo. You may or may not be familiar with Sodexo, but 2 members decided to branch off and form Arbor Management in 1986. And since then, the company has grown substantially. We are based in the state of Illinois. We're based in Itasca. That's where our headquarters are, our test kitchens and everything. And we operate in the state of Illinois, we operate in the state of Wisconsin, and we market to the rest of the Midwest. We currently serve right around over 60 school districts between the two states. And as far as around this area, as you mentioned, Christina is the food service director at Morton, and you also oversee Midland as well. Canton Union is close by. Midwest Central in Manitou is also close by. El Paso. I'm trying to think of all the other ones that are around this area, and Dwight as well. But as far as, and tomorrow night we are the recommendation at Urbana School District as well. So not too far from here. But as far as the opportunity for Muhammad, it was a tremendous opportunity. We looked at it as a tremendous opportunity when we went through the bid process. And as far as the transition goes, we always look for a very smooth transition. And anytime you go into a new school district, you have the opportunity as to whether or not the food service director that's currently there stays or goes. And if the person chooses to stay, then great, we can work with that individual, and that works out very well. Or we have an opportunity to bring in someone that's qualified to be the current food service director. But what we do in the meantime is we have an opening team, such as the three of us, and we are here on site on a daily basis until an actual food service director is chosen and approved by the Muhammad School District and Arbor Management, because we want to make sure that we have the proper person in place. And that also creates a very, very smooth transition with the employees, with the rest of the team at Muhammad, and also the fact that we are preparing food for a very large number of students, and we want to make sure that nothing goes wrong, especially in a market that we want to make sure that we are successful in. And so that's kind of the brief description of what a transition would look like. And throughout the last 30 plus years, that has always been successful for us. So that's, I guess, what I can tell you very briefly.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so from a dollar and cents standpoint, I love the fact that we get to bid this out every 5 years, and it's even better when we have competitive bids and not just one company. So I'm really appreciative that Arbor was going to, they threw their hat in the ring and they came out on top. Any questions for them? What we have done? They were very patient to stick around and appreciate that.
Hey.
No taste testing for us?
Yeah, got those cookies?
Yeah, so. One question would be, how does the size of the contract and the operation here compare to what your average is?
Typically, we have, out of our 60 school districts, the majority of our school districts range from right around 1,000 students to about 4,500 students. That's the majority of our school districts. So you would fall right into that sweet spot category.
Sure.
So.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the rest are larger or smaller?
Both. We have districts that are as small as 300 students in Dwight, Illinois. And we have school districts that are as large as Woodland School District, Gurnee, which is about 8,000 students.
Okay.
So.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll be working over the summer, pending approval, of course, working over the summer to ensure a smooth transition. And our first meeting for that, again, pending approval would be this Thursday here at Middletown with the existing food service staff. So just to give them some information on what that might look like next year.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the food service bid as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Colleen is on the second. Further discussion or questions? Roll call vote, please.
Larson?
Yes.
Hendricks?
Yes.
Giles?
Yes.
Hennessy? Yes. Key?
Yes.
Schultz?
Yes.
Hill?
Yes. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Very nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Some help with this.
Oh, hey.
Sorry to have you here all
It's been
night.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
You guys can feel free to stay or go. recap where we were. And Nathan Mills is up. This is a.
Thank you, be careful.
Thank you so much.
This is a presentation and question and discussion. There is not a vote on this. Go.
All right, so good evening. Just wanted to update you on some work that's been going on for literally since day one of the school year this year, of looking at some concerns from the staff, from the student perspective, and how we can improve that. So I'm going to go over those tonight. So first and foremost, just start in no particular order, but start with 0-hour foreign language students arrive after 8:15 start time. So our students start, 8th graders taking Spanish or French, start at the high school at 7:25. They're let out at 8:10 with all the traffic and whatnot. They're usually about 2 minutes late every single day back to the junior high. So that's a concern. You know, the buses are there every day. They don't have to wait on the buses. It's just, you know, logistically, it's tough to get from the high school parking lot down to the junior high, unload, and get into class. So they're about 2 minutes late every single day. So that's the first concern. Second would be the PE classes during lunchtime. When mainly winter or when it's raining, when our recess is inside, take up the blue gym, the smaller gym. So it's a long winter when recess is going on, especially for the 6th graders that in a particular PE hour, there's 120 kids. So those 120 kids go into one space. It's a safety concern. So the next one would be health during physical education. This year it's every Monday, and then on early dismissal days, they also have a health day because they don't dress because of the 30-minute class period. Current student lunch schedule, currently, and it's been like this for 6 years now, the boys and the girls are split, all right? The boys go to lunch, the girls go to recess. 20 minutes in, we switch, they flip-flop, all right? That's very concerning for the developmental age of those students. On to essentials in the daily schedule. So they have PE every day. They have a choice between band, chorus, tech, STEM, and art. And if you take band and chorus, you don't take tech, STEM, or art. Okay? So 3 different class rosters, and I'll get into more details in a little bit. Those art, tech, and STEM, they have 3 different class rosters depending on what day of the week it is. So, and then the final concern was the special education flexibility in the current schedule. So moving on, kind of what the day to help with this, and I'll go into more detail. Next year, we're going to start the day with a 6-minute homeroom. So the bell rings at 8:15, there'll be 6 minutes. That time will be used. It'll help the 0-hour students, maybe a couple minutes late. They're not going to miss any instruction. They may miss an announcement, they may miss the pledge, depending on if they're on time or whatnot. Some students will be able to, we use a check-in, check-out system. So that homeroom time will be utilized for a check-in system for many of our students. I have first and second periods really because the schedule, math and English is double blocked where the kids spend 80 minutes. Those class period, those times will not change, they'll stay the same. So we go first, second period, then third and fourth period, and then we have, in theory, a 5A, a 5B, a 5C lunch. Kind of resembles the high school, but it's a little different in the sense of if you eat 5A, you're going to have a 30-minute lunch period, then you're going to go to a double-blocked 40-minute 5B, a 40-minute 5C, okay? If you have a 5B lunch, then you're going to have 40 minutes of class, 30 minutes of lunch, and then 40 minutes of class. If you eat 5C, you'll start with your double block and have 40, 40, 30, okay? So we're minimizing those periods down to 30 minutes, and I'll get in more depth of what that looks like. Then we'll have our final periods, the 6-7 block, and then we're going to end the day with something. Right now it's called ELT, Extended Learning Time. We're going to change that name to Bulldog Power Hour. It's going to be a 40-minute period, and it's going to be all-encompassing, and it's going to cover a lot of different things. A lot of that's still in the works, and as the team leaders and the staff kind of throw some ideas out there, that'll be fluid. It'll change and can constantly, hopefully, improve over time. So Specific solutions, and I kind of went into this, that homeroom will allow 0 hours students to arrive before first period begins. They won't miss instruction. As far as physical education, okay, this is a big one. There were a lot of moving parts. The best way I can describe this is we share music people with Lincoln Trail, we share them with the high school. So when our essentials prep periods, the last 6 years have been first and second period, because that music schedule was dictated by sharing with other buildings. So this was a long process of meeting with music, brainstorming, finally sitting down with Megan from Lincoln Trail, Anna from the high school, and explaining, this is what we need, what can we do to come together, what can we shift? So both buildings, including mine, everyone shifted. Lincoln Trail's moving some music time, the high school's moving some music time, and this was a joint effort between the 4 music staff, 2 chorus, 2 band people. What can we do to improve this so that we get essentials around our lunches so that PE does not have to share that gym space? Because it's having 120 to 130 kids in one gym, there's a lot of kids sitting. We don't want that. It's a safety concern with that many students. It's just not a great situation. So I really appreciated the joint collaboration between Lincoln Trail, the high school, and all of the music people to say, this is what we need, what can we do to improve this? So it was a very good experience. Health will be a separate class next year, 9 weeks, and it'll happen in 7th and 8th grade only. The requirement is they have to have 18 weeks of health in their junior high. So in 6th, 7th, and 8th, they have to have 18 weeks. So we're not going to have health in 6th grade, and then in 7th and 8th grade, they'll have 9 weeks. So on day 1, they'll know that Nathan Mills has health, 3rd hour, 3rd 9 weeks, and they'll pull out and they'll go to a separate area. What that'll also do is it pulls 25% of the kids out of PE, and so of the 120, we have 4 teachers, 1, and they'll all take turns, they're all certified in health. 1 will take 30 of the kids and teach health. Well, that leaves 90. So then we kind of have 3 spaces depending on the time of the year, 4 if you count outside when it's nice. But having the orange gym, the blue gym, and the mat room, it should help with numbers and the crowded areas for physical education. So we're excited about that. The PE staff is excited about that, not having to worry, is it raining today? Are we gonna have to take the 120 kids, change our activity completely, not utilize the blue gym? So that will be a huge improvement for the schedule for next year. Student lunches, we're gonna condense, go 1 30-minute lunch period. All kids are gonna be together. It's going to be tight. We're gonna use the stage. We've worked with Steve Curtis and our district architect as far as like square footage and how many kids we can have with the egress points we have. We're gonna put a removable railing up there so that it won't, when drama comes along for when they do their musical or anything drama, they will be able to just remove that, okay? And we will have tables up on the stage. We'll have tables, pretty much it'll fill that area. But the nice part is, there won't be PE going on in the orange gym, so we'll be able to open the door like in the winter months and have kids right there that when Nathan Mills is done eating for the last 10 minutes, he can go shoot hoops, he can bump a volleyball, he can, burn off some energy during that time. Now, if Nathan wants to stay in the cafeteria, read a book, hang out with his friends, he can stay there. We're working where some of our teachers with this new schedule will have a lunch studio, we'll have teachers in there. We have not had teachers for several years, we've had lunchroom supervisors. So I'm excited about that, having our staff in there. And our plan is to still have supervisors that we've utilized, but they'll be the ones that are in the gym, they'll be outside when it's nice, and it'll be a flexible time. So it'll be, I think, it's very, very important that for the social development to have the boys and girls together. I think that'll be very good for all parties involved. So. Essential schedule, the current schedule, like I spoke to it earlier, so they have 3 different rosters, okay? Again, PE is every single day, but if you're in art, or if you're in band, you go to band Monday, Wednesday, Friday, okay? And then if you're in chorus 2, then that's your Tuesday, Thursday. For those kids that are only in band, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, on Tuesday, Thursday, they pick an elective, 1 each semester, and they may go to art for first semester on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They may go to tech or STEM on 2nd semester, okay? If you are in chorus or chorus only, And on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're going to art, tech, or STEM, all right? So the art, tech, and STEM teachers have a 5-day-a-week kid, a 3-day-a-week kid, and a 2-day-a-week kid. So it's very difficult to slow the 5-day-a-week kid down, like an art on a project, and speed the 2-day-a-week kid up. So through discussion, what we're planning on for next year is we already have the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we already have the Tuesday, Thursday with band or chorus students. So what we're going to do is take the students who are, art and band or chorus. They're going to have, they may have art for Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and tech Tuesday, Thursday. At the semester, they'll flip-flop those 2 classes, and then they'll get a semester course 2 simultaneously for the whole entire year, and that will take care of aligning. The teachers will know on Monday, Wednesday, Friday I have these kids, on Tuesday, Thursday I have these kids, because right now it's very, very difficult. It's not ideal. So that's a little, hopefully I explained that well enough, but it's a little confusing to kind of wrap your brain around it. And the essentials teachers I think are excited about that, knowing that on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, these are the kids I have. On Tuesday, Thursday, these are the kids I have. So, especially for planning purposes. Special education. So currently the system is, we have two special ed teachers per grade level, okay? And they each currently have their own caseload. So they may have anywhere from 8 to 11 kids on their caseload, and those students are with that case manager all day long, okay? So that case manager goes to math, English, history, science, all right? We are going to move away from that for next year, and each special education teacher, one is going to only concentrate on math, one is only going to concentrate on ELA. Paraprofessionals, aides, are going to help cover science and history. The case manager will still modify, they'll still do the curriculum work during science and history, but the paraprofessionals will be in the classrooms, all right? The caveat is we're going to increase the amount of co-taught classes, and students, because currently our students are in an orange team or a blue team, so we are going to actually have them, some of them may only be blue, some of them may only be orange, but depending on the schedule, some of them may take 2 classes with the orange team and then a class with the blue team. And it's to allow us some flexibility for the students. So the students are going to be separated, and then potentially there might be issues. We can move kids around, because right now we're pretty well locked in to that schedule. So when there's issues, we can't necessarily move kids because they're aligned to their case manager. So next year, they'll be aligned to the co-taught classes, but they'll still be with the case manager. They'll start their day with the case manager in that homeroom. They'll end the day in our Bulldog Power Hour. I'm kind of skipping ahead, but they will be assigned and aligned with that teacher to end the day for 40 minutes. Students will now have an option to take essentials classes. Before, they've been in a resource study hall during that time. So that essentially that resource study hall will move to the end of the day for Bulldog Power Hour, and our kids won't have to make a choice. They will be in an essentials class. So we're excited that this, like all of this, the special education teachers and myself, Christine, I sat down with them, they bounced ideas off Christine, went back and forth to come up with this new schedule for special education. For the other areas, it was a lot of meeting with the team leaders, bouncing ideas off Mr. Fisher, working with the music people, working with Megan, working with Shannon at the high school, and getting a lot of input. This took several months to work through the issues and coming up with a solution. So I appreciate all the help. Mr. Fisher, I bounced a lot. Him and I bounced a lot of ideas or random text or, hey, what about this? What about that? What can we do to improve? And then would throw it out there to our team leaders, threw it out there to staff through a survey, and just really got some feedback on where we wanted to go. So, I truly believe the junior high is a good place, but I think that this will benefit all students next year, and it'll be a better place. So, any questions on specifics? I didn't necessarily do a great job of communicating, but if something's, if you have a question, I'd be happy to do my best to answer it.
So do you have any concerns about kids being able to get through the lunch line? What does that look like? 'Cause
So,
how much bigger is lunch now? Pretty doubled, right?
Yes and no. Yes, in theory, it is, but several of our kids bring their sack lunches, okay? Right now they're probably through the line, and would you say 7 minutes? But part of that is the transition because we have to bring kids in from recess. So part of the new schedule will be that they won't be back to back. So A lunch will happen, there'll be a 13-minute break, okay? B lunch will happen, there'll be a 13-minute break. So right now we have a huge bottleneck of kids coming and kids going. So doing that now, it won't be like that. And we won't have to transition kids to go out to recess, to come in from recess. There'll be less transitions. So I think, you know, and I've had communication with the current staff. I'm hopeful they stay next year because we've worked through it of like what this is going to look like, you know, concerns and what we can do. She's thrown out some suggestions, so we have some ideas on how we can improve the efficiency of that.
So what's the current length of time for lunch and recess now?
40 minutes.
Total. And it's going to 30 minutes?
30 minutes total.
I have no idea who came up with that essential schedule, but it's brilliant.
I agree.
I mean, brilliant.
So it was a group effort of bouncing ideas, so I'd love to say it was all me, but it was some essentials teachers, it was some team leaders of saying this is what, because without getting it, we'd love to go A, B, but it can't happen. So this was the next best thing. So which I think those of you who have students with the essential schedule, it's difficult. Yep, it's difficult. So I'm hopeful. Will it be perfect? No, but it'll be an improvement.
We have struggled with the schedule at the junior high for as long as I can. And we have, I think a lot of good people have tried to make a lot of good improvements. I think you did a great job bringing people together and
appreciate that.
Getting us to a better solution in the end, so.
For health, what do we do now at the junior high for health? When do they take it?
So they take it 6th, 7th, and 8th, and it equals like basically 6 weeks because they've currently had it. So.
And why did you choose 7th and 8th for health?
That's a great question. That's how it used to be, is my understanding, correct?
Yes.
So they wanted to go, feedback from the PE teachers, they wanted to go back to that.
Okay.
So.
Is there any concern that you've got a big block where kids aren't gonna be running around because they're gonna be in health? Is that, I mean, because they're now going from Mondays only, and now it's gonna be just a big block every day, is that, am I understanding that correctly?
So the plan will be that, like, if you have a 7th grade student will take 9 weeks with a PE teacher, a physical education health teacher, and they're actually going to be in the cafeteria. We're gonna put a projector in there, that'll be their classroom, because there won't be, during lunch, there won't be any health classes.
But they won't be getting any physical activity during, like,
Correct.
the PE part of the physical activity is out of that.
It is, for 9 weeks.
Okay.
So one question or concern that I've got about the health choice is I'm assuming that at the junior high level, and please correct me if I'm wrong, topics like puberty and sexual health and safe sex and things like that are part of the curriculum now, is that correct?
Correct.
And those are effective if they happen before those typically arise in a student's life, right? You know, it's typically before they start entering puberty. Are you concerned at all by backloading it in 7th and 8th grade?
So currently, a lot of that in detail is in the 8th grade curriculum, just because of age and maturity.
Yeah.
So I know that next year, physical education and health will be part of the Dr. Rommel's rotation, and I'm excited to have that conversation and to study that more of what that looks like from probably from a Lincoln Trail all the way to the high school.
Yeah, I just would want to make sure it's in the right position developmentally for those kids so that they're being safe and they're educated, about what they, thank you.
Any other questions?
Really appreciate your work. Thank you.
Yeah,
And thank you for everybody involved. And the staff.
Next item up, approval of parent-student handbooks. Dr. Hall.
Okay, this is the annual update and revision of the district parent-student handbook. And this starts at our administrative team looking at the handbook and seeing what revisions need to be made, what updates need to be put in there. It then goes to our parent-teacher advisory committee, which met on May 1st. And our attorney has also reviewed the changes. So there's a summary of the changes, and then at the beginning, and then the entire handbook with all of the changes in them. So really, there's nothing I would call very substantive that's going to change our practices or anything that we really do. It's just really more reflective of what we already do, and there are some updates in there as well. So including a list of our state assessments, lunch prices, which I know we're voting on next, but we can change that if we need to. There's also reference to board policy and medicinal cannabis. Should we, looking ahead, my plan would be to bring that medicinal cannabis policy to the board for approval, so then the student parent handbook would reflect that that policy exists. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Superintendent recommends the board that approve. The parent-student handbook is presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion or questions for Dr. Hall?
The one thing that I remember talked about last year by the board was the acceptable responsible use agreement with respect to Chromebooks. I know that there was talk about updating that last year. I didn't see any updates to that. Are we still working on that? Are we going to update that based on the feedback we got last year?
The update was really more on our website, I thought, not what was in the handbook. But
I feel like the language was part of the issue last year, and the language seems to be the same, so I'm just wondering if we're gonna take a look at.
I'm happy to do that, but my memory could be faulty, but I thought that the concern lay with what was being asked on the registration, on online registration, the boxes that have to be clicked, and also what was on our website, not what was in the handbook.
Well, unless it's changed, and again, I kind of relied on what you showed us was changing. The agreement and the language was the same in the handbook as it was for the online registration with respect to being responsible and taking sole responsibility for the device. And then the handbook, the devices are really only for 6th through 12th grade, and the handbook is district-wide. So the parents are kind of agreeing to an agreement that's not even for some of those kids. So,
Sure.
I would still like to revisit that language because I think it's a little bit problematic. And have we fixed the registration so you don't have to agree to this in order to register? Is that?
You don't have to anyway to register.
Okay, last year it was you had to click the box in order to complete registration, so we've changed that.
I thought that we ended up that you didn't have to click the box. I have to be honest, it's been 10 months ago, so I'm happy to revisit the topic. I just have to refresh my memory.
Okay. Yeah, I just like to keep that one on the radar because
Sure.
I'd like to circle back around, and if we need to update this tonight and then come back to it, but I would
We
like
can do
to
that.
take a look at that language.
We can do that.
Any other questions?
Would it be easier to table that for now and approve it next month after that's looked at?
Fine with that, Jean?
I defer to the board for that.
Just so we're not
We don't have any,
updating,
is there any
changing,
problem with
updating.
the changes that we have right now? Because we can always make changes added as an agenda item for an additional change, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
I don't see any problem with approving with what we have. There's no reason to table if we agree to what's in there.
I would agree to get something on the books, we can change, add as needed. Any other discussion? Says I need a roll call on this. Jennifer?
Hennessy,
Yes.
Schultz,
No.
Keefe,
Yes?
Giles,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Okay, next item, approval of non-certified administrative IMRF and administrative packages.
This is just the annual recommendation for either pay increases or extension of some multi-year contracts. The average pay increase for certified administrators is 2.29%, and the average pay increase for non-certified IMRS staff is 2.8%. As stated earlier in the meeting, there's actually some cost savings in the next fiscal year of just under $5,000, $48.79 over this year. That is due to retirement and replacement with lower cost folks. So that's my summary of approval of the administrative contracts.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the non-certified administrative IMR and administrative contracts as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion and questions?
What's the benefit for the school district in having multi-year contracts for the administrators?
So that when they're taking buildings through changes, they have the opportunity to look out ahead and have some long-term vision for their buildings and get to know their staff and have stability.
So one key difference, I want to make sure I understand one key difference between single-year administrators and multi-year administrators is the single-year administrators, the pay can be tied to performance, but the pay for multi-year, that's set in the contract, so there's no room there, right? Do I have that right?
Yep, generally speaking, you're voting on a contract that has built-in pay increases on the multi-year. Those are generally offered historically in the district, and maybe you can speak to this as well, but those have been offered to people who have shown their excellence in leadership here and are known quantity and have been evaluated. And it doesn't mean that people on multi-year contracts are not evaluated, they are. So that doesn't go away.
There's a continuity piece to that. There's a planning piece to that. It's easy for Trent to project things out, and he knows what the numbers are gonna be ahead of time. We're also in a situation now, quite frankly, where good administrative talent is harder to find than it used to be. We've seen that the last few times we've went out and done searches. And so quite frankly, it's more important than it was a couple years ago when I first came on the board probably, to make sure that people know that we appreciate them and we want them around. And quite frankly, it helps us to lock some people in a little bit. So that's been the